Okay, welcome to the December 6, 2017 meeting of the Hatfield Planning Board. My name is Bob Wagner. I'm the chair. To my right is the co-chair, alternate chair Paul Dostal. To his right, Rick Bertram. And then proceeding down further, Paul Labby. To my left is Ron Saucy. And to his left, Wilma Davis, our administrative assistant. We have a public hearing, continuation of a special permit with site plan approval for Helena Chemical Company, which we'll take up first. Doesn't look like the folks for the other hearing are here, so I'll have to read this twice. I'll open the public hearing. I guess we'll read the meeting notice again. And then I'll provide the applicant and/or their representative to describe the project and any specific requests that they have of the board. I'll then entertain any comments from supporters that happen to be here in the audience. And if you have any questions of the applicant, to make them to me as the chair, and I'll direct them to the applicant. We'll then ask if there's any opponents of the project here present. And we'll do the same thing if there's any questions you have, to direct them through the chair to the applicant. The board and its members will then have a chance to ask the applicant or any supporter or opponent any questions or anything for clarification. We will then close the public hearing and decide at that point if we'll deliberate on the project and make any decisions relative to the project, or to take the project under advisement with a decision to be rendered within the period of time required by state law. So with that, we'll open this hearing. The Planning Board of the Town of Hatfield will hold a public hearing, and this again is a continuation of that public hearing that was originally on November 1st. To review a proposal from the Helena Chemical Company of Hatfield, Massachusetts, who is seeking a special permit with site plan approval from the Planning Board pursuant to Section 5.4 of the Town Zoning Bylaw relative to a property located at 101 Elm Street, Assessor's Map Lot 104, zoned for business for a 60-foot by 138-foot addition on the west side of the warehouse with steel construction to match the existing business building in accordance with Section 3.0 of the use table, subsection 5.5, processing or warehousing of agricultural products. So with that, Tom Carter, you're here, and if you want to do this, and I would ask you in particular, in light of our request of you at that last public hearing to provide all of the required material for the special permit application contents, if you would actually go through that list with us item by item as you make your presentation, that would be great.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Super. I don't know if this is where you want it, but whoever needs to see the site plan.
No, that's good, because we have these documents in our file.
Yep.
And so if that's okay for John, then I think that's good.
Yeah. So this is the site plan. I had George Dole here work up the information that you have. The site plan with the proposed 60 by 138 building on the side. This is no change from the building that we talked about 14 months ago when we first decided to move forward with the zoning change to change that section at annual town meeting. So there has been no changes from, like I said, 14, 15 months ago when we first came in and had these discussions. You've got all this information here as far as our project, and you already mentioned a lot of it in the notice. But Helena Chemical is the owner of record, and you have the plans signed by an engineer that David
that-
Vreeland.
Yeah, the surveyor, the plan that you submitted to us, do you have a copy of that that you can put up?
Sure.
Yeah, that one, that's the one, yeah.
We've got so much stuff, Bob. But this is the site plan from a year ago, except for the modification that was requested to show the location of Sunset Avenue.
Okay.
So you have
And tied into Elm Street.
correct.
And is that's stamped? That one is, you have attached foundation plans for the stamped inside by Vreeland Design and
That's
Associates?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
What about your surveyor? Is that, Rod, is it typical to have that stamped as well by the surveyor? So,
David Vreeland.
so we just.
I don't know why it didn't show up on the print. His isn't stamped either.
Yeah,
I don't think this plan is suitable for recording. It's not a recorded plan, but I wouldn't see why a surveyor wouldn't stamp it. Maybe he just
maybe on,
oversight.
yes.
Okay, so that's something we'll need to, well, you need to bring in, you would eventually need to bring in Mylars anyway, right? For signing, if we get to that point?
Yeah, that'll be.
We'd all have to sign.
Yeah, so those.
So
would-
that'll be
Those
stamped.
would have to, yeah, that would have to be stamped.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, this is really the only addition that we made from 14, 15 months ago is to add, so you had the location in town
okay.
that you requested,
yep,
okay? Okay. So this map that I had up before talked about, were there any questions on this from the board that I can help with before I kinda acting like Vanna White here, changing these back and forth, so.
that's okay,
I'm
so.
nowhere near as entertaining.
We have, well, actually, while we have this up here, so the bulk of the addition is on the lot,
It's on the west side of the building.
yeah, but it's on, what is that, lot 62, right?
Correct.
That's where the main, and then, so how much of it falls onto your other lot? The
This is actually.
lot 104, actually.
Lot 104, and it goes over onto.
Lot
what
62.
What would be lot 62.
Okay.
That's that 15 feet that,
That's, okay, that's, so about 15 feet of it moves over onto lot 62, the bulk of it being on lot 104.
right. and-
Okay.
And from the site that the zoning was changed, we're still 50, I believe we're 57 feet. From the lot line? From that new line.
Okay, where
The
your fence,
exist-
where that fence is?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, okay. All right, go ahead, keep going.
Okay, so. I know one of the needs was, this map also shows the topography of the site, where we're gonna be. And it's a GIS map, and it's a flat, anybody that's been to that site, it is really, there's no 2-foot increments to speak of on that site where the building's going. So it's really a very flat site, but the drainage does go down towards, not into the field, but just inside, just beside the field, there is a divot where it's just a natural drainage. And actually, the water from Zagrodnik's and this side of the building both go in there now. And that's, there's gonna be no change to the grade. It's gonna be the same water heading in that direction after the building's erected as it is now.
Okay.
Okay. One of the main reason for this is just the change in our business just like our customers have had changes, and we've gone more into the seed business. And I've talked about that pretty much every time I've come in, is that we need that extra storage, and it needs to be, it needs to be dry, and it needs to be rodent-free, and that's a lot of what this will be used for. Also, some of the things that we keep that come in all-weather containers that are kept outside not during the winter, but during the spring, summer, and fall, we're gonna have room for those on the inside. Probably the biggest thing for us is the convenience of this new building. Right now, if you came up the side of the steel building, where you come around this tobacco barn, when the weather's decent, when it's not a rainy day, what happens in the spring and summer, when we're real busy and we're staging loads for our trucks to take out the next day, they get staged in the parking lot. Not convenient for our traffic flow at the site, and it's not convenient when a thunderstorm comes up that we have to hustle everything back in where we're trying to work. So the staging area is gonna be, the new building is gonna facilitate that staging area, so it'll all be undercover all the time.
So do you have any, so just to be sure, you've got, this also shows your lot coverage and your distances to property lines? Are those noted on this map, or do you have them on another map?
The description's on here.
Yeah, they're noted in the report of being actually 54 feet from
54 feet.
from the lot line.
The new building
The
will
new
be.
building.
What about your existing buildings? Is there, the requirement is actually existing and proposed structures and distances to nearest property line. So do you know what all of those are? Or, I mean, I'm not sure if that's how.
You have a copy of this map, correct?
Yes, yeah, that was sent to us. Wilma, did you copy all of the PDFs
Nope.
that you sent?
Those-
Okay.
190
It's in
feet.
black.
Those are in the
Yeah.
packages. You got the PDFs, and then I hand-delivered the packages.
I'm not sure I see Ron has one. It doesn't look like I got it, Wilma.
The color one.
That's this
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
That's not showing the new addition. That's purely showing the original buildings. Or not showing the new buildings on the lot.
So this is, so if you could, so this 19 feet here is from here to here?
George, you want them all?
The 19, yep, the 19 feet is, these are from the GIS lot, so this is 19 feet right here. That jog is 19 feet.
Okay.
That's 106 feet. So the distances here are about 12 feet there and about 50 feet here to the lot line. This is about,
We have 46 feet here.
46 feet.
To the back
Yep,
of that
yep.
one.
yeah,
Okay. And then the addition is 54 feet from
From the
that.
new- the
from
new
that-
lot line.
That new lot line. Okay. Yeah, I don't have that package.
No, I'll give it to you.
I have, I think I have double.
Yeah, I've got the large one.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
Take this one because I have.
You have a second?
I have it
Okay.
again.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
one of the points is that the existing buildings, the way they are now, cover 18.58% of the lot, while the revised lot and new addition and the existing buildings will cover 20.
Okay.
Will cover 20.9.
Here, Bob. This is-
Oh, okay. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Parking. We have adequate parking for what we plan to do. We're not looking for any big influx of employees. Running a seasonal business, you can imagine sometimes it's hard to get enough employees when you need them. But customer parking is right in front of the office, and we really don't have them come in and hang around very long. So that works quite smoothly. And our employee parking is out behind on the south end that we use, which is down here.
So your parking is actually on your map, it's just not,
It's
not.
here.
It's there, you just don't have it
Yeah.
lined out or anything like
Right,
that.
it's not like we're making a lot of extra we're not making any new parking spaces out in here. But, you know, our parking, we have this entire lot here, and actually, when we move these materials, a majority of those inside, there's gonna be more room for vehicles and traffic flow, like I said, around that tobacco barn.
Okay,
Just so you have an idea, when trucks and so forth come in, the common carriers and so forth, they come down the driveway, and when they get down, to the second barn going south, the trailer trucks and our big trucks go over here to get into the loading dock. Regular pickups and so forth, street traffic, come all the way down and get to the office. And then the correct traffic flow is for them to come back up here and back
head
out.
out, okay. So are you anticipating as a result of the additional building that you're gonna have new, additional employees than you have now? Or is it pretty much gonna stay at where you're at? It's just more the space you're looking for?
It's more of a space, more usable space, more protected space.
He's got no additional employees. in
Yeah, okay.
Item number 11.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
I mean, we go, to give you an idea, we have about 8 to 10 that you would call year-round, and then we swell to about 16 or 17 in the busy, depending on how many people we can get, for April, May, June, and then it starts to tail off again. I mean, it's just the nature of our business that it's a very seasonal business.
Okay.
All right, so that will be a help to us, is to be able to manage that traffic flow. Because when you come down the driveway, there's a stop sign there at that last barn, because we don't know how much is coming the other way. And if we can keep them going around, they can, you know, they won't be hit by that blind corner.
Right, okay.
Okay? Okay. The loading areas aren't gonna change. That was one of the questions, or one of the things that we needed to talk about. We still only have those 2 loading docks. There's no additional loading docks proposed with this, so we're still gonna be 2 at a time loading, except unless we need to load one out in the yard. You know, sometimes people come in with trucks that don't line up to the dock right, and so we load them with a forklift out in the yard, but.
So it looks like we're up to number 8.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the building being 60 by 138. The actual building, what I refer to as the building, is 60 by 125. And then there's an 18-foot overhang to the north. The reason I wanted that in there is it gives us a little room to maneuver outside that's not in the weather, because there's some overhead doors there. Plus, in the winter with those box trucks, if I can at least back up and get the boxes out of the snow, that's kind of a dangerous thing, is cleaning off the top of those box trucks when we want to run in the winter. I mean, cleaning off the cab, and, you know, not any different than you cleaning off your cars when it snows. That's not a big job, but instead of putting people way up on top of the roof of a truck when it's slippery. So that's the idea, is we can keep trucks underneath that, so we don't have a snow accumulation when we head down the highway that's gonna blow off if it doesn't happen to get cleaned out, so. Okay? 8, we already talked about the water, the map, the plot plan that you have, shows, one of them, yeah, this map again, shows you where the, utility changes have been to the water and the gas line. Those got moved over a year ago now.
Is that, can you point that, is that
Right
through the
here.
common right away, or?
Right here.
Oh, okay.
Right, the water and the natural gas came in, actually, they were gonna be under the building, so we had them changed, so they're well outside of where the footprint of the new building would be.
Oh, okay, so they're in the, they're inside that fenced-in area, but out off
Yes.
beyond where your building's gonna be, okay.
Oh, you know, as far as screening and so forth, all we have is the fence. Somebody years and way before my time, attempted to plant some arborvitaes, around here, where the loading dock was. I'm not really sure why they planted them there, but they were there. They really don't provide very much screening, and I actually think a few of them will, they're not in very good shape, and a few of them will come down for construction. I think they'll be in the way of equipment and so forth. But we do set well back off of the street there. But I'm open to, we do have some really good, close neighbors in the community to the west of us. So if something was needed there for any kind of screening, certainly we'd be open to that, as long as it was tasteful and added to the community.
All right, we'll wait till we see
Yeah.
what kind of feedback we get. I know we had some members of that community present during one of the informal conversations.
It was actually the hearing that we had when we talked about going
Oh,
for the
zoning
for the
change.
zoning change.
That's right, yep, okay.
And they discussed that, and
yeah.
I'm certainly open to that. Especially now that they've put some nice plantings in on their line,
Right.
so. I don't know if there's any other questions about that. The new building, you've got plans that look like this, that show what the building is. We're gonna match up the color, so it'll be that same type of brown color as close as we can. Of course, the existing building is faded a little bit, but we'll have that. And,
And if I remember correctly, that end of the building, or the side of the building that faces Hatfield Village, or, yeah, right now, there's open doors there, right?
there's big overhead doors.
Yeah, and those are actually going to be, the building is going to go where those overhead doors are, and it's going to be a solid wall going
Correct.
forward, right? Those doors won't be there anymore.
That's right. The
Okay.
only thing that's gonna be on that west side is there'll be two man doors.
Right,
Show on that elevation.
right,
Right.
yep. And, yeah, just regular entrance and
Right.
exit doors, right.
Right. So, yeah, this is showing you where those arborvitaes are and those big overhead
Yeah.
doors. So
You're right, the arborvitaes don't really screen much, do
they
they?
don't screen much, and I can't really see that they've grown very much
But
since.
that's the view from
since
the
I've been around.
street, so it's, you can see it's quite far back.
Right, okay.
And so I guess that gets us to 10. There aren't going to be any changes to our signs, or the dimension or height or any of that sort of thing. But the signage will remain just the way it is, that one sign that's got the shrubbery around it, which is really on Greg's property, Zubrodnik's property. So I've already discussed number 11 there as far as what we do. We don't manufacture any material, right? This is a distribution warehouse, so material comes in, material goes out. The 90% of it or more, 95% of it comes in and goes out in the original package that it was in. We do some mixing of fertilizer and handle a little bit of bulk material, but that's nothing to do with the new building. Really, the reason for doing it is to keep the place neat and clean and safe, so we're not jammed up with material, and we're able to organize it and be in a safe atmosphere to handle it. And the change in our building of handling more seed. 16 years ago when I arrived, we didn't do any seed. Now we do golf course seed, we do farm seeds, we do corn seed, we do soybean seed. We handle a lot of that, and that's just a lot of bulk. But it's still a agricultural supply business. There won't be any, the elevation plans, we've gone over that. Plans for clearing and stockpiling topsoil. There's going to be very little, if any, topsoil removed. It's all sand. It's pretty much an excavated site. We may have to bring in a little bit of gravel just to have some compacting material for the floor, of course, but it's not going to be a big earth-moving project by any stretch of the imagination. We really found out what the soil was like when they changed the gas and the water lines there. I mean, it's pretty much dead sand where that is. Then the drainage is excellent. You know, it can rain 6 inches and you don't even know it. And the traffic, we talked about that. I don't expect the traffic to be any different than it is now. Any big changes in that at all. Common carriers come in and common carriers go out at the end of the day. The difference for them may be, you know, as the business grows, you never know if you're going to put 2 pallets on or you're going to put 6 pallets on, but the traffic's the same, you know, when they can hold 20. So you've got the plans and so forth.
Yeah, just
so
backing
I'm
up a little bit, and then we'll open it up to supporters. Backing up a little bit, I didn't see it, so I just want to confirm that the building, the addition it appears as if it's just going to be entirely open storage space. There's no offices or bathrooms
None at all.
envisioned within that space.
None at all.
Okay.
It's open space.
Excuse me, if there's other conversations to be had, not on this, take them out in the hallway, okay? So we can just concentrate on this. Okay. Tom, are you done then going through? Are there other items here that?
I'm ready for
Okay.
any questions that you have.
So, well, actually, I want to ask if there's anybody in the audience here to support this project that would like to make a comment. Now would be the time to do so. Supporters?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My name's Steve Casey, 12 Woodward Circle. I support growth of business. I support a complete and comprehensive review of the bylaws. I support the bylaws as written to protect the public and, you know, conduct a safe operation. So I like that this is being done, providing it's done in a safe manner. So just like the chair to consider the following items. For clarity, which parcel are we talking about today?
So the project, and you can confirm, Tom, the majority of this is on Lot 104.
Correct.
With a small portion of it actually being on what the assessor calls Lot 62.
Okay, so for legal notices, we're talking about 1 or 2 parcels.
Well, it's, I guess it's technically 2 parcels, but the legal notice, the majority of the property is on lot 104.
Could you clarify if there's going to be any additional pavement in the area where some of these chemicals will be handled?
Is there any additional,
I didn't
is,
see any paved.
yeah, other than the superstructure, the foundation for the building, is there any other pavement being planned?
No,
As a
there's
result, as a part of this project and proposal?
No, there's no proposed, because we won't be running truck traffic over there. There may be, where we're gonna access that building, there's already some hard pack, a little bit of gravel there on that piece that's right next to the loading dock.
So you're not expanding the parking?
Impervious surface?
Impervious surface, other than the building itself?
You're correct.
Okay.
I believe the bylaw also called for an explanation of how refuse is handled.
Yeah, there is a,
Yeah. So, Tom, can you address how this new building increases your refuse and where your bins are and your garbage as related to this particular building?
Yeah, I can't see that it's going to increase that at all. We have a contract where Waste Management comes in and takes all our stuff out. The only thing, and it has nothing to do with this addition at all, is that we're going to be adding cardboard recycling, so, you know, we can just have our trash and then, you know, the cases, the cardboard cases and the things that pallets come in and that sort of thing that can be recycled, we're gonna be actively recycling those. But we have those up by the office. I don't.
Is that a compactor that you're going to put in?
No,
No.
it'll just be a open, but you break it
Dumpster?
down, a dumpster.
And those are, so in other words, you're not adding to the existing dumpsters, it's all going to take place in where it currently is located up near your office?
Yes, yeah, but there will be an extra one for cardboard, but that's
Yeah.
not related to this. We work really quite proactively on recycling all the time. We
the
don't-
bulk of the seed, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The bulk of the seed that, when that comes in, I presume it comes in on a pallet?
It does.
Is it in a,
In paper bags generally.
how about,
You know, they're 50-pound paper bags, there may be 60 of them on a pallet, and for the most part, probably is inaccurate, but it goes out on a pallet in 50-pound bags, except, you know, and sometimes you have to break
So you're
those
not-
pallets down to
you're
fit
not
the
breaking
order.
open and repackaging or any of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely
To a
not.
certain extent?
Absolutely not.
Or
The
not- or
only time one gets ripped is
As if it's something.
Damage.
Some
if I get on the forklift,
shipping or
maybe.
comes in shipping, or if somebody gets on a forklift and
Correct,
accidentally hits it.
correct. Yeah, that's not a,
So are you doing any, of the materials that come in, is there any processing that goes on in terms of mixing and that'll happen in this building? Or is it what,
no, not at all, not at all. Like I said, the product comes in the container, it goes out in the original container.
so this is just a storage area?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, in regard to the other structures out back, that containment vessel and the other tanks out back, all for there be proper permitting, and I understand that if the tanks have something other than water in them and they're more than 10,000 gallons, the state fire marshal requires permits, and I'm not such a stickler for the permits, but what the annual inspections are for. Those inspections are then, you know, to serve as a notice that they're safe and operating. Just ask the chair to verify that those permits are in place before the permit is awarded.
It's got to do with the building.
It's really not specific to what's in front of us. Because he's asking for an addition to an existing building that if they were to sell this structure in this area, it could go, I mean, it could be storing widgets.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm all for proper permitting. And if the chair is also for that for public safety, then I'm asking, I've asked the state fire marshal, I've also asked the town fire chief if those permits are in place, and so far, nobody knows.
That's not, it's not really in our purview as the planning board. We're being asked to look at whether or not a project meets the requirements in terms of an addition to an existing building in a commercial zone, business zone.
They're not on the plan, and I was looking forward to seeing that information provided with this meeting.
I don't think they would be required to be on the plan because they're not germane to the addition specific to this building and what's before us.
Can you verify all drains are shown on the plan too?
We have the engineering drawing. Can you show the drains associated and drainage associated with this building? I'm confident, yes, those are, because we've seen the drainage swale in the detention center, detention
Talking
basin,
about the parcel in question or the building?
the building.
I'm talking, are we reviewing the parcel or just the building?
We're reviewing not the parcel, but the request for the addition on this building. That's
My
what,
understanding of site plan review encompasses the whole property, as Tim behind us will probably show you too. His plan's quite detailed. I was expecting a detailed plan as that. But if you don't think it's necessary, then we'll get to that at another time.
well, we'll talk about that when we get to our deliberations.
Right, because I did see in an old plan, a drainage swale that goes out to the property out back, that may or may not require a bordered, a wetland designation. I don't know. I don't see that on the plan. And most plans that I've seen up for review contain that information.
It's our understanding from what has been provided, and also Conservation Commission Chair sits next to me, that this is an area that's outside the floodplain and there's no designated wetlands associated with the building addition that we're being asked to review tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that when we're,
As far as that.
yeah.
So are you granting exceptions for the plans not being stamped and having the 2-foot intervals on them?
The construction plans are stamped, and it does appear as if there was an oversight that the surveyor didn't stamp this one, and a Mylar has to come in, so I think we'll just make sure that that's stamped when it arrives.
Is there a requirement that the plans show lighting in the bylaws of the town?
There's no lighting associated, or what's your lighting plan for this building?
The only lighting, exterior lighting for this building will be over the man doors on the west side, to escape doors, so there would be some lighting there. And under that 18-foot overhang on the front, there'll be a couple of lights that we would turn on if we were working this time of year at 5 o'clock and wanted some light for
So there's
moving
no
around.
there's no additional lighting to the driveway area, to the parking lot that's, other than what's there now?
No.
Okay.
In the last hearing, the applicant said some trucks come in overnight. Could you perhaps discuss the hours of operation with the applicant?
Sure, and this I know is an issue that came up on the other hearing that we'll have later, so.
Sure.
How do your,
Sure. In season, our regular business hours are 7 to 5. I mean, that's when we're open to the public and taking care of customers. Routinely, we may be loading trucks till 7 or 8 o'clock. I mean, that's not a secret during April and May. That tails off considerably when we get into June. So that doesn't happen. When trucks do come in overnight, it would be, let's say a trailer load of whatever came in, and if the driver happened to be coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning, like truckers apt to do, they come in and they park in the driveway and wait for us to come in so we can knock on the door. The most we've ever had is 2. Actually, they normally will stay outside of the gate and park along Zagrodnik's barns there.
and since you're looking to expand what you said is your area for storage, this has been a historical, traditional use of the property now for quite some time with trucks coming in. Will this change dramatically with what you're putting in?
No, that's what I was trying to get at when we were talking about the traffic, is that common carriers come in there during the day now. You know, there's 3 or 4 of them. They generally show up between, let's say, 9 and noon in the morning and offload, and then they will come back between 3 and 5 o'clock and pick up our outgoing freight that we would ship out on them. It's still truck traffic regardless if they come in with 2 pallets or 15 pallets.
But I guess my question is, what you're proposing, it doesn't appear as if you're anticipating it increasing the amount of truck traffic. It's more that you can get more stuff under a roof as opposed to where right now it's outside.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And as far as increasing truck traffic, I don't see that happening because there's plenty of room on those trucks. You know, like I say, they may come in with 2 pallets. Now they may come in with 6 and go out, instead of going out with 4, they go out with 8. And it's still the same traffic.
Okay.
I guess my question pertained more to the, perhaps what's called 8 hours or hours of operation. You know, having an 18-wheeler standing there running or idling, and perhaps handling dangerous chemicals, and, you know, availability of people to respond to an incident.
Again, this is an existing business and an ongoing business. It doesn't appear, at least to what I've heard, that the addition to this building is changing what otherwise has been the operation of this business for many, many years.
So as it pertains to business fee zoning, that hours of operation is typically defined or regulated? How? I'm not sure.
Well, we're not asking to put in a new business, so we're not going to necessarily change that, but we've had on a number of occasions, most recently a business out on North Hatfield Street, right? Wasn't it the roofing guys where we
Yeah,
made
7 to 5, or
Yep.
I guess it was.
Well, our normal hours are 7 to 5, but that doesn't mean we're not, you know, in the busy time of the year. Very seasonal business. I mean, right now, we're 7:30 and we're out of there at 4 o'clock. And there's no truck traffic that's sitting there. I've been there 16 years, and on occasion, and it's a rare occasion that a truck comes in overnight and sits there. When I get there in the morning, they're not running, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been one of our neighbors that are close by that have ever had any complaint or even mentioned it, that a truck came in, so.
So
If it's an issue, I'd be glad to talk to any of my neighbors about it.
yeah, so we're actually in during, just so that people are clear, if you came in late to the game, we're actually during the period of the hearing where supporters are coming up to talk about the project. So so I'm going to ask, because this does get to what neighbors, is there anyone in the audience who opposes this project, and specifically on the subject of their working hours? Okay, and I do remember actually when you came in to talk about the zone change, the folks from Hatfield Village were here.
Sure.
And I don't remember this being an issue that they raised. They were asking more about what
What was going to be stored in there?
what was stored there, and also what the west side of the building was going to look like when it was done.
Correct.
Because right now they're looking at those garage doors.
Yep.
But I don't remember them bringing up the subject of hours of operation. Okay.
I got one more question. I
Yeah.
guess. The garage bay doors you got there now provide adequate ventilation. You're gonna be closing that building off now. Is there sufficient plan or review that place changes air enough in the summertime especially?
Yeah. Could you ask the-
So we're gonna have mechanical, monitored ventilation on the fans on the south side of the building, with intake on the north side of the building. And we got those overhead doors that are gonna open to really feed a lot of air in.
The overhead doors that are there right now?
The overhead doors that are gonna be in the addition on the north end.
Oh, that's right.
as an
There's
exit.
overhead doors on the north
North
end,
end.
right, yep.
So,
Yep,
so, but there's also gonna be, mechanical monitored ventilation, so the louvers will open and it'll move air through. The new building is not heated. This addition is not a heated building. It will be insulated. A lot of that to control moisture and so forth inside, but there will be ventilation
The
involved with
two
it.
doors that you're covering with the new addition are replaced are they the same size as the two doors that'll be on the north end of the new building, approximately? So you're
No.
covering over two doors that are on the existing building?
We're covering up 4 doors.
Four doors, yeah.
4 on the picture.
Right,
Yeah.
4, and so you're gonna have 2, that's right, there's 4, and you're gonna have 2 on the new north end of your building.
Yeah.
In addition to this forced air
Yes.
fan system.
Right.
Okay.
I got one more question. I know you didn't want me asking about that drain, but I didn't see it on the plan. I didn't see a hydrant noted on that plan. That's usually required on a site plan review. Can you show me where that is, unless you?
Can you show us where the hydrant is?
Sure, I'd be glad to. The hydrant is right down here. It's right on the back side of the building. The water main actually comes around the building and then comes right over to and that was a brand new, we put that in new. The old one was really old, and I want to say 5 years ago, I had them put in the water superintendent came and we updated that and put a brand new fire hydrant in.
Okay.
In the event you can't get to that, where's the nearest one after that?
Be up on the street.
The
fire
fire chief
chief's
is
here.
here.
Right.
Where is do you know where the next nearest fire hydrant is to this?
I can tell you in a minute, I can look it up, but in fact, he's gonna put another hydrant in, like, very likely anyway. Just the requirements, the building requirements is that be a sprinkler building, he has to have a hydrant within so many feet of the fire department connection. So he very well could be required to put another one in. If I can remember right, there's one on their driveway and the next one is out on the road. I'd love more hydrants in this town, but find out who's gonna pay to put them all in, because it can't happen. But he may be required to put one more in, once we do some measurements based on where his fire department connection is, and I have the suppression system, which all comes with the building plan.
And that would all be part of the
building permit.
building permit?
Yes.
Yep, okay,
Building
all right.
inspector and I work.
Thank you.
yep. So are there any other supporters of the project that would like to speak? Okay, are there any opponents of the project that would like to comment at this point? Now would be the period of time where if we had other questions to ask you, I'd like to actually not ask you, but the fire chief, can you just comment on this project and what your, any thoughts you have, or in light of the questions that were just asked, or?
So the crux of the project, are taking totes, intermodal bulk containers, whatever you wanna call them, product from outside the building and putting them inside the building, makes this a safer site. My concern from the day I started this job was, and I told Tom, was that I had concern about the security of the facility and the amount of product outdoors. You know, but do we wanna put up 6-foot picket fence, stockade fence? No. And can we require him to do that? No, but we can encourage him to make it safer. By moving more product inside, it's a safer facility, and because it's gonna contain it. It's gonna keep it out of the hands of children and anybody else who wants to be vandals. Concerning the tank farm is under the purview of the State Fire Marshal's Office, in conjunction with myself, but they control tanks over 10,000 gallons. It's been referred to their office. Their code compliance gentleman came out. He looked at the site, he referred it to the engineer. He felt that there was no immediate concern. He felt that the engineer will look at it and they will grant them their permit. That being said, this is small fish, compared to the big jobs they do. They didn't find any problem with this. Dave Bowden was his name. I spoke to him. He told me, yep, he was there. He looked at it. Their engineer has it now. But in general, he saw no reason to immediately put a cease and desist on or restrain them from any further trade. Eventually, it's on the docket. The fire marshal's office will grant him his permits, and then we move forward on that.
Just, how long ago was that?
Oh, God, that was probably 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay, so it's in
And
the
I'll
last
be honest with you,
six
again,
months?
This is
6
small
months,
fish.
probably.
Okay.
This is a site they came to, they see no hazard, they see no real threat. they see that the containment is more than acceptable, they're gonna get to it, but you know, they're not gonna rush to get to it. I hate to say it, but that's.
Yeah, I want to say it was pretty close at this point, since it's December, to 6 months ago. And when they came, I gave them a tour of the entire site and the whole place, and the fire marshal was pleased.
And,
I do think, if,
Yeah, go ahead.
I hate to interrupt,
Yeah.
especially Steve, but this addition is gonna increase our footprint enough that we're gonna be updating our fire suppression and protection.
We should talk about a sprinkler system and fire protection system, because they take, over the years, if you look at the building, if you've been to the building, years took many bites of the apple, and it's never tripped the code. Well, now it trips the codes, they have to talk about a fire protection system. They also have to, if they're gonna drive forklifts inside that warehouse, they have to put an automatic meter that measures carbon monoxide at all times, and it goes on at a certain time, and it immediately ventilates the area. That stuff all has to come into play. It wouldn't have 2 years ago, it wouldn't have a year ago, maybe, but it clearly does now, so.
And that might very well require then an additional fire hydrant.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And so once we talk about fire protection, there's sprinkler plans, and we're gonna talk about where the fire department connection is, and we talk about where the hydrant is. We had the same discussion about this building no less than 2 weeks ago. All the projects, how it goes, you need to have, sometimes you have to make moves like that. That would be on the additional hydrant would be on the easy burden of the property owner to put that hydrant in, not the town.
Do any of the, I have one more question for Tom, but any of the other board members have questions?
Oh, he answered my questions
Okay.
regarding the fire.
Steve's, my question was the fire stuff, that's all.
Okay.
If he's on top.
All right.
Yeah,
No.
I like to think that we're very good neighbors, and I think I'm as proactive as probably anybody can be. I mean, I make sure I call Steve every year around the same time that we can get together and go around and make a list and check on all these things, so.
I do have one more question for the fire chief. Is there a requirement to have an annual inspection by the town?
There is, he fits under the annual inspection for some of the permits,
Okay.
It's a storage of flammables, some other stuff, so he's on the annual permit schedule anyway.
Okay.
And so once we talked about fire, he truly today, based on when the building was built, he has no fire alarm system. He doesn't have to have one today. This will trigger that. This will make it a much safer facility, because we'll be allowed to regulate it, you know? But yes, he's on the annual inspection list with all the other places in town. He gets his permits.
So, Tom, it doesn't appear as if any of them are here, but I'm thinking back to the Hatfield Village folks, and your engineer, I believe, George, you pointed out and showed the picture, and I agree that, from Elm Street, it's pretty far back, and maybe even those arborvitaes do a decent job of screening, but you do have now a number of neighbors that were not there certainly when you first went in and established your business here. But could we talk about maybe putting some screening along that west line, your fence line there, between them and you guys?
Ever since we met 12, 14 months ago and had that hearing, I mean, their concerns, I'm not deaf to that, and certainly putting some screening in there wouldn't be anything that we would think would stop the project, certainly. I would like it to be the right kind of screening. I mean, I wonder about arborvitaes on that sandy soil, exactly. I mean, I was actually thinking like some native hardwood trees planted along there or some such thing as that, but along that fence.
Along the
So they wouldn't even see the fence at that point.
Right, that's what I'm thinking is that along that fence line there, screening that west facing of your, although it will be now a blank face, but separating basically the physical space between you and them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm certainly not opposed, no one in our organization would be opposed to that, but
I think probably a combination of deciduous and evergreen trees of some sort, because if it's just all deciduous, you're just going to have trunks there
Yeah.
for 6 months of the year. Are there any other questions? Okay, we're getting up onto 7:30 when we have our next hearing. I'm going to formally close the public hearing on this project and open it up for any deliberation that we have amongst the board, which would include asking questions of Tom if need be, or any of the other folks, or Peter who spoke, or the fire chief who also spoke. Any discussion at all?
Just, I think most of the questions have been answered regarding fire suppression, inspections, you know.
Impact
particulars
on
about the
traffic
building.
and-
No increase in traffic, no increase in hours. It's just a storage building that's being added.
I would like to entertain a motion from someone on the committee to approve this project special permit with site plan approval for the project as proposed, with the addition of vegetative screening along the west lot line between lot 62 and actually the zoning line, because that's, zoning line actually splits lot 62. It takes a little hunk out of it for the business zone. So along that west zoning line between the rural residential and the business zone.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve the project as proposed with the addition of a vegetative buffer screen on the zone line to the west of this building. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Tom, we're going to need you to bring in Mylars and stamped.
How many?
Wilma, how many?
One Mylar.
One.
And we'll need 7 more copies.
Of a stamped site.
Yeah.
Of the subdivision plan.
Same as those, Bob, is what you want. Is it in front of you? All of this.
Well, we need the,
It needs a planning board block, it needs a lot.
Yeah.
It needs a surveyor certificate, certification.
right, on this one though, Ron, right?
Yeah.
On this one. So on your site plan? So you're going to need a Mylar of this and then 7 additional copies, Wilma?
Yes, this
With the stamp, the surveyor stamp, and
Planning board block.
the planning board block for us to sign. And, you know, for good measure, I know your drawings that you're going to use for your permit have your engineer's stamp on it, but if you might as well get the engineer's stamp on this as well. Okay?
Tell them there's a 20-day appeal period.
Oh, yeah, so,
Breland.
huh?
Dave figured.
Dave Breland, right?
Yeah.
From the
right.
time we
Yeah.
get that,
Yeah.
once we get that.
Yeah, so from the time, thank you, Paul, just reminding me that, so from the time that we get this, and Wilma will be able to let anyone know who wishes, there is a 20-day appeal period from the time that we get these and sign them. And we'll do that before our next meeting. If you get them in, Wilma will alert us to when they're there, and we'll come in and sign them.
I appreciate it.
And so you want, for the Mylars and the 7 copies, you want both the surveyor's stamp on that as well as the engineer?
Yeah, because the engineer was probably involved
In that.
in laying out that, well, they were involved in laying out the whole project, but yeah, you might as well just get their stamp on there too. Okay? All right, thank you very much, gentlemen.
These are all yours? You want to keep these?
No, because we're going to get what we need in terms of those. Do you want these? Actually, why don't we take not the boards, you can take the boards. We'll take the sheets, yeah,
You can put them in your cardboard bin.
yeah,
Thank you, gentlemen.
yeah. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next hearing. Can you let the folks know, do you have a sign-up sheet going around, Wilma? Okay.
There's mine too.
Where's our general counsel? I thought he was going to be here at 6:15. I did talk to him.
It's out there.
Holy cats, they're pouring in.
So we better go to the
Better
school.
start selling tickets.
Switch it over to the school.
This guy was one of the most pleasant guys I think we've ever had in here.
Yeah.
Hi, Randy. Hi, thanks. Yeah. 4 years. Took over for Corey Bardwell.
Has it been 4 years? Yeah. Wow.
How about you?
I thought I've only been on it for 4 years.
Okay. I think a 3.5 then.
Thank you, Wilma. Is Gary out there?
Good evening.
Oh, there he is.
This is all us.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I want to talk
Good evening.
marijuana
Good evening.
because I'm trying to figure out nationally the same things that you guys are working on here, trying to figure out. Because I always thought it was agriculture, and now I'm understanding it's not, it's commercial.
It was specifically, the law that was passed this past summer specifically removes, or doesn't remove, it doesn't include marijuana production as an agricultural use. It specifically states that.
And it goes with, talks about hemp.
Yeah, yeah.
Just something we can talk about. For the rest of it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, here, Tom, this is in your capacity in Ashfield, right? Yeah. Yeah. Here.
We all gotta do our public service.
Yeah.
I just wish it was a term, it actually was a term instead of a sentence. When you do it over and over again, right? Huh?
A glutton for punishment.
Sharing everything.
Take that. Yep.
Got some literature to read now.
All right.
Okay.
Well, now, I'll see you.
Saying it's for it, he's asking these questions that don't matter related to the building.
Okay, so there was a sign-in sheet going around. I'm hoping that everyone who's come in has signed that. Where is it right now? Okay, so if you need to sign it, if you could grab that, we'd appreciate that. And then that eventually needs to make its way up to the front of the room.
Negative.
Okay, so we're going to open a continuation of the hearing from November 1st on the Diamondback properties. Since many of you were not here when I read this before the first hearing, I'll read it again. So I will open the hearing by reading the hearing notice. We will then ask the applicant or their representatives to describe the project, and in particular tonight, since we're in the second phase or second round of this particular hearing, I'd like the applicant and their representatives to specifically speak to the items covered in the special permit requirements, and how their project addresses those particular items. We will then open the floor to any supporters. A number of you were here at the last hearing, so if you have anything new to add, I'd appreciate hearing it. If you're not adding anything new than what you've said before, then in the interest of time, we move on. We'll then, if you have any questions of the applicant, to make those through the chair, and we'll direct them to the applicant for response. I'll then open up the floor to the opponents of the project. And again, if they have questions of the applicant, to make those through the chair, and we'll direct them to the applicant. The board will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant, a supporter, or an opponent questions, at which time we'll eventually close the public hearing and decide at that point if we will deliberate the project or render a decision subsequent to this particular hearing. So with that, the notice of this public hearing, again, it was originally on November 1st. This is a continuation of the public hearing for the applicant Diamondback Properties LLC of Hatfield, seeking a special permit with site plan approval pursuant to Section 3.0 Use Regulations, subsection 4.18, professional, medical, and business offices and services of less than 15,000 square feet. 5.15 warehouse and storage, and 5.16 wholesale trade and distribution of the town of Hatfield zoning bylaw relative to the property located at 65D Elm Street, formerly known as 17 Little Neponset Road, Assessors Map 223, Lot 35.1 and 35, currently zoned industrial, for redevelopment of an existing historic building formerly used by the General Cigar Company for storage, processing, and distribution. The proposal is to create offices, workshop, storage, and distribution. And with that, I will ask the applicant or their representatives to step forward and address the particular elements of the special permit application requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I'm Alan Seawald. I'm from Northampton, and I represent the applicant here, Diamondback Properties LLC, Al Albano, another attorney representing Diamondback. Since we were last here, I guess it was in November, early November, the board asked a couple of questions that I addressed a couple of questions. The first one was whether, I believe it was raised by town council, who wondered whether the board had the authority to waive the width of the aisles in the parking area. I have filed a memorandum with the board. I hope everyone's gotten it. And I will just summarize by saying that under the bylaw, it is unclear to me whether the bylaw requires 24 feet or 20 feet, but it is clear that under section 5.7, this board has the authority to reduce the width of the aisles in the parking area. And with that, we have asked, to the extent that the board deems that 24 is the width that's required, that you accept a request for a waiver down to 20 feet, which is a safe width for vehicular travel, and the width that the fire chief suggested or stated was the minimum width that would be acceptable to him. So you should have that. I've also filed 3 different sets of proposed findings, and in thinking about this hearing tonight, I was not intending to go through them line by line, because we'll be here, I mean, it's fairly long. If that's what the board would like me to do, I will certainly do that. But And so I will start with the proposed special permit findings under 5.37A. This, and I'm just going to go through, I'm not going to read the standard. This is a proposal of, for uses that are allowed by special permit with site plan approval under the bylaw, under sections 4.18, 4.19, 5.15, and 5.16. It is in compliance with all the provisions and requirements of the bylaw, and we'll ask you to find that this is in harmony with the general intent and purpose. This is an existing building in an industrial zone that predates zoning. Dimensionally, it's non-conforming, and you know, these are uses that are called for in your bylaw in an industrial zone, and I believe that they are reasonable, measured uses of the building that are not traffic intensive and are clearly consistent with the intent of the bylaw. Public convenience and welfare will not be, there will be no detriment to public convenience and welfare. This is an enclosed site on a private road. As the civil engineer told you last time, we would not expect there to be any significant degradation of the level of service at Elm Street. And it's, again, it's the redevelopment of an existing building.
Sorry, you referred to it as being on a private road?
Yes, it is a private road.
Okay.
As far as we know, it's a private, we have not found a layout. It's a private road that various parties have rights in, including my client who now owns, you know, both the front piece and the back piece, or controls the front piece and the back piece.
Okay. I sort of remembered at the last meeting, there was talk of it being a town road, so.
Well, there was decades of talk of being a town road. We haven't found the layout, so we're going with the private road.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to clarify that. Since the, I think it goes back to, correct me if I'm wrong, 2014 or 2015, when the board approved an A&R plan for the subdivision of the rear lot. At that time, there was some presentation made that Little Neponset was on the Route 90 list, I'm sorry, the Chapter 90 list of town roads that receive reimbursement from the state. However, the building inspector had a question, and we did research it with the help of the town clerk. We determined it has not been accepted by town meeting. So it does constitute a private way that's been in existence for some time.
Okay.
The next question is whether the proposed uses will overload any public water, drainage, sewer, or any other municipal system. I would suggest that office, storage, and distribution are not the type of uses that are going to overload municipal services. This is served by town sewer and town water, but there's no reason to believe that they would be overloaded by these uses. Will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining zones. This is an industrial zone, it's an industrial building, it's an existing building. Really, most of what's going to happen is inside the building, just to repurpose this building for use in the modern times. Any site plan approval has been requested and obtained. Well, we have requested it, and we hope that at the end of this process, we will have obtained it. Stormwater, surface water, groundwater during and after construction. The engineer has designed a stormwater system here, has designed a system to control stormwater. And I know that Mr. Melnick has suggested that the stormwater is somehow not, plan is not appropriate. I would just suggest that we have a plan drawn by a civil engineer who has drawn many of these plans before and has applied the stormwater regulations. Mr. Melnick is not an engineer. I don't understand the Kopakis to be engineers, and they really have no basis to be testifying to this board that the stormwater system designed by a professional engineer is inadequate. Adequate methods of disposal and recycling of sewage, refuse, and other wastes. As I said, this is on sewer, town sewer. There will be a private contract for refuse, waste, and recycled materials. And the design of the project shall minimize the visibility of visually degrading elements. You know, the project itself exists. It's a building. It already exists. There's no way to screen the building because it exists and it's been there for more than 100 years. We have taken pains to the extent we can here to add trees and other vegetation so that to screen it the best we can. But it's not a site that can be completely screened from the one neighbor who is complaining about screening. We've done the best we can, but in essence, we have screening by the barns of this parking area here. We have natural screening by the house and the barns at least from Elm Street. We are planning to put some vegetation here to screen to the extent possible this side of the parking area. And, you know, this parking area is, it is what it is, and I would suggest that it's been a parking area for a long time. I'll move on to site plan approval if there are no questions. The site complies with the performance standards of 6.1 to 6.7. I defer to my next set of findings. Hatfield design guidelines, Ms. Davis was nice enough to help me determine that those don't exist, so that's not applicable. Minimizes traffic and safety impacts of the development. I would suggest that the uses that Mr. Pachurek has chosen for this building are the types of uses that are on the lower end of the traffic spectrum here. These are not medical offices or a pharmacy or retail or a club or anything like that. These are offices where people are working all day. Storage is not typically a high traffic use, and so I would suggest to you that we comply with that, with these minimally traffic intensive uses. If you would like to hear from our engineer about convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site, it is a relatively small site with relatively small parking areas. There are walkways. We did put in a bike path, a bike rack, and I'm not really sure. I'm not seeing it. I see. And there's no reason to believe that there is not safe pedestrian movement within the site. Do you not have our revised?
I think you need these.
Okay, and so how do you come to the conclusion that there's safe pedestrian walking around? I mean, how do you come to that?
Let me have the engineer address that, please.
All parking areas have access to the building with a sidewalk. So in the front area is serviced by these sidewalks. In here, basically coming through a main entrance, there's a area of here. It doesn't make sense to put, crosswalks out in the middle of the parking lot. So anybody parking across the way, they'd walk over here and come across the loading area here. In the back parking lot, this is mostly office space parking, so the folks would come in here and come in the back entrance over in here. There is also a rear entrance that can service any parking that happens out here in the building.
And so assuming that you have offices in here and people want to use their bicycle, say, to get to their office space as opposed to you feel as if what you've laid out here is a safe environment for them to ride their bike in?
We don't anticipate a lot of bike traffic You know, obviously, if there's a need to put a bike rack in a different location, it's very easily done. It's not exactly a super, fixed item.
And if the board feels like the bike rack should be somewhere else, we're open
Yeah,
to
I
having
mean,
the
if-
bike rack anywhere else.
Okay, go ahead.
The site plan minimizes traffic and safety impacts on adjacent highway or roads. This is an existing road meeting Elm Street. All the roads within the site will be at least 20 feet wide. Integrated into the existing landscape, and it protects abutting property. This is this is an existing structure. The exterior additions will really have no impact on the existing landscape or abutting properties. Minimizes adverse environmental impacts such as wetlands, floodlands, and floodplains, and aquifer recharge areas. Again, it's an existing building being repurposed. Scenic views, same. Preservation of unique natural and historic features. Well, this whole project is the preservation of an historic feature in this town by repurposing one of the larger tobacco sorting shops in the Elm Street Historic District. And, the Historic Commission and local private historical organization have all supported this. We're not looking at significant tree removal. We're looking to add trees to the site. Open space retention, again, it's an existing site with an existing building. Screening of objectionable features from neighboring properties and roadways. As I said earlier, we have tried to screen to the extent possible this project from the neighboring properties. It is a tight site, and it is an existing site. The architectural design, layout, and landscaping of the development is in harmony with the historic rural character of the neighborhood and the town. Again, this is a mix of residential and commercial uses in this area. It's an industrial zone. It is, as is the property immediately to the east. And it is the redevelopment of a building that's been there for more than 100 years. So, and the restoration of the exterior is substantially to the appearance that it had when it was used for tobacco processing. So I think we meet that guideline. Adequate water and waste disposal system, again, town water, town sewer. Prevents pollution of surface or groundwater to minimize erosion and sedimentation. Again, we are controlling our stormwater here on site. Protecting historic structures, number 8. Again, this is a protection of an historic structure. And the final thing in the site plan are electrical lines and telecommunication lines and other utilities shall be underground, and most of them are already, and the phone lines will be placed underground. And we would expect a condition to that effect. So now for the, unless there's,
No, I have some questions on this. So, looking at our industrial development performance standards, so under landscaping, no less than 15% of the area of the parking lot, not including perimeter areas, shall be permanently landscaped using planting strips, diamonds, hedges, bushes. Do you feel that you have adequately met that standard?
We're at approximately 19%.
Okay. Plan and maintain 1 deciduous tree per 8 parking spaces.
We have 1 per 8.
Okay. There's also, and we'll probably get to this at some point during the evening, there is Whereas an industrial use abuts a parcel zone for residential use on the side or rear, a dense vegetative buffer at least 50 feet in which shall be provided and maintained. Now, I know that you mentioned that this area is pretty tight, but have you done everything you possibly can to address screening to the adjacent residential uses?
Are you talking about this?
Well, in that house in particular. I mean, I see one tree.
I would say we have, I mean, because basically you've got the parking here. Here's the house up here. If you look at the view shed coming across, the only parking that there's gonna see is this parking right here. The handicap spaces.
This is not specifically related to parking. This is just to screening and buffering of the industrial
Yeah.
building.
There really isn't, this is a large building. You see it from the road. There's no way, unless you blocked off the road to screen the building. You see it down Little Neponset Road. There really isn't an opportunity to do a lot more than what's here. There are barns that you know, block the view of the building.
That's Elm Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they block the view from abutting properties also, with the exception of Klepacki House right here.
So, okay, well, I'm just wondering if you've done everything you possibly can. I mean, the only vegetation you have that's specifically between the building and that house is a dogwood.
Yeah, I mean,
Which isn't, I mean, is, you know, for 6 months of the year is a bunch of sticks.
yeah, I mean, you're not gonna get, I mean, you could try and put a maple tree there, which would, by the time it got any decent size, it's too big for where it is.
Well, how about evergreens? Something that's actually green or,
you know,
that has some screening capability 12 months of the year as
I
opposed to
think
6 months of
that's
the
a
year.
possibility.
It's fine with the
yeah.
applicant to put
Yeah.
an evergreen type tree there.
You know, these, we felt these were a little more attractive. You put an evergreen, it's just kind of a big evergreen, it's gonna block the actual architectural. You know, you're gonna put a big evergreen right here that's gonna kind of grow up, and it's gonna block the windows, and so on.
I think they're called clippers.
Well, I guess it's a balance, is all I'm saying.
Right, and
so-
that's what I'm looking for, is a balance here, too.
Yeah,
So,
so-
okay, all right.
I would also suggest, Mr. Chair, that if you're going to be doing a balance here, you have to balance the fact that the owners of this house bought a house adjacent to an industrial building that is where it is and is in a tight space. And, you know, the only other, I mean, if this is unacceptable, then, you know, the only answer is not to redevelop the building. I mean, there are, you know what I mean? There are,
I don't think this project and your desire to see the project happen is gonna live or die on 3 or 4 evergreen trees.
I agree.
Move on.
Okay, thank you. I have analyzed this as a commercial project, not an industrial project. There is no industry taking place here. This is just purely commercial uses, so that's the way I have analyzed this, under the commercial development performance standards. The first one is a traffic impact statement. We have provided a traffic impact statement. It is something that you could waive. It is within your ability to do so. We submit that the traffic study that was submitted is adequate. I think there's some perhaps misunderstanding by Mr. Melnick about exactly what traffic studies are intended to do. If the question is whether this build-out will increase the traffic on Little Neponset Road from what it is today and what it has been for some period of time since tobacco sort of died in town, there's no question that it will. But that's not what traffic studies are intended to measure levels of service at intersections. That's what traffic studies do. And so I have no qualms telling the board, yes, there will be an increase in traffic along Little Neponset Road. By the way, Little Neponset Road, the property on both sides of Little Neponset Road where it enters from Elm Street are owned by Tim. And the Klepakis don't touch Little Neponset Road where it meets Elm Street. So Yes, there will be more traffic on Little Napontet Road. We have provided a traffic study. No new curb cut is proposed, so the next finding is inapplicable. Driveways designed to afford motorists exiting to highways a safe sight distance. If you'd like to hear from Mr. Reynolds, the sight distances are quite long at that point on Elm Street, and I believe they do comply with the Mass Highway Design Manual. Safe interior circulation, separating pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular traffic to the extent possible and feasible. We have done that, as Mr. Reynolds indicated. We have provided walkways from all the parking areas to an entrance. Pedestrian, bicycle access, sidewalks. There are no sidewalks needed in this proposal. I don't know where the sidewalks would go. A sidewalk going up to Elm Street would be a sidewalk to nowhere because there are no sidewalks on Elm Street.
Well, that's because you're looking at the commercial standards as opposed to the industrial standards.
Well, I didn't
Yeah.
see this as an industrial use.
Right, that's fine, but I think their sidewalks are intended for commercial, right? If you're putting in a shopping mall,
Right,
you
but
don't
we're
want to
not-
have one that doesn't have any sidewalks.
No, I understand. I'm just stating why we don't have sidewalks. Driveways and circulations, this is where it gets a little unclear. Again, we have, aisles shall be not less than 20 feet in width. And I consider that these are aisles in the parking areas. They're all going to be 20 feet in width. We're going to be off of this plan, and Mr. Reynolds will correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an area of Little Napontet Road that isn't quite 20 feet wide up toward Elm Street. Now that Mr. Pachurik controls the front part, we will be extending, we'll be widening Little Napontet Road to make sure that it's at least 20 feet wide at all points. And again, I would expect a condition to that effect. Pedestrian walkways, integrated in design of the lot. I believe that we conform with the parking requirements of these standards. I feel we're going over, again, some of the things that I've talked about before. Screening and buffering, again, we're putting in trees where we can. We'd be happy to add more if there's, if the board saw places where we could improve that. The landscaping, I think you just addressed that with Mr. Reynolds. Stormwater management, again, we have filed the stormwater report, and I believe it conforms with the requirements of this standard. The loading docks are in the rear. They're naturally screened from the neighbors.
You're not adding any new loading docks, are you, or?
No.
Okay.
The appearance and architectural design, again, this is an historic building that Mr. Pachurik intends to redevelop with a facade that resembles what it was back when it was a sorting facility. I believe we conform with the landscaping and lighting. Again, stormwater management and the environmental standards, stormwater management. We have filed a analysis. Erosion control, I believe we comply with all of these standards at this point. If there is something specific that you would like me to address, I will stop putting everybody to sleep reading all of this.
Why don't you just jump to number 8, storage and materials. You say that the proposal conforms to the requirements of this standard. Have you had an opinion from the fire chief on the storage of any potential hazardous materials. I know there's a talk about having vehicles stored there. They, of course, have gas and oil in them, you know.
I have
Well,
not
this-
spoken with the fire,
We have,
you have?
at the beginning, when we first bought the building, they walked through and we had an engineer design carbon monoxide.
Talk to the board,
Carbon
please.
monoxide detection, exhaust fans turning on automatically. Sprinklers are all placed how they're supposed to be. And there was an engineer.
Steve, can you just,
So quickly, just similar to the project we had previous to this, they are going to adjust, they're going to change some of the use group within their building. They're gonna make some adjustments to the sprinkler system, much to the dismay of the previous group and maybe Mr. Patrick at some point. They're gonna have to redo the flow tests to assure their sprinkler system, because the water flow tests we found in town have dropped considerably in the last year to 2 years. So he's asked the sprinkler, it's gonna be, the sprinkler system will have to be in accordance with whatever the use is at that time, and have to be adequate water flow. Carbon monoxide meters and a similar, if there's vehicles operated in there, they're gonna be that same similar automatic monitoring parts per million, automatic ventilation. And then the building inspector, he has the ways and we work conjunction, so.
We-
Steve, while you're here, about the width of this traffic flow pattern of 24 feet to read up to 20 feet.
20 feet.
You got any problem with that?
Fire lane's 20 feet, the code says fire lane's 20 feet, they don't have, the fire chief doesn't have the purview to alter that at all. So it is 20 feet, someone can say 24 feet if they want, we cannot get it less than 20 feet, you can't bargain with that.
And we're fine with that,
okay.
totally. And we're fine with whatever condition you impose based on what the fire chief is telling you as to testing the, you know, pressure.
Well, that'll be the pressure tests that,
Flow test has to happen, so they have the flow test this building, they have the flow
Yeah.
test across the street, and
Right.
the flow test down. Because the flow tests that we did on this site 3 years ago are significantly less today. And so it requires a fire pump, which means they have adequate water flow, that's all. And it's done in every project when you have some type of alteration of the system, knowing that there's a flow difference in the municipal system. We require that they're gonna do flow tests again and assess the water flow, do they have adequate flow to serve whatever the use group is, whatever the occupancy is.
and that would be part of the permitting process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Permitting with myself and the
Yeah.
building inspector's building permit, and any fire suppression, a permit to alter his fire suppression system.
Tim, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
we actually have an annual test that does that every single year, and I believe that it's on the 8th, which would be this week. They're doing the full test, they test everything.
Okay. Are you done, Mr. Stewart?
I mercifully, I'm done.
Okay. Are there, well, I was going to ask if there's any supporters
I
that
just
want.
want to say
yeah.
that with all the questions we've asked and all the meetings, Tim had the most concise letter sent back to us of all of you guys' preparation. He says, I want to rent my building, and I'm going to rent it to whoever I get. That was. Yes, thank you.
Are there, the chair and the board welcome any comments by supporters in the room? Again, I know a number of you were here the last time, so if you've already spoken, unless there's some significant change in what you'd like to say, or anybody else that wasn't here the last time around that would like to say anything on behalf of the project? Yeah, sure. You have to come forward and then just give your name and.
I didn't speak the last time, so I wanted to say something today. My name's Kim Coachella, and I live at 58 Elm Street, which is directly across the street. Tim's building does a wonderful echoing of my voice throughout my property, which my kids have enjoyed. I kind of just wanted to state about the traffic flow. As we all know, traffic is incredible. It's difficult to get out onto Route 5 nowadays at certain times of the day. And Elm Street is, I've been there for 35 years. And the difference today from when I moved in to when my father lived there is incredible. It's inevitable. We're all driving, So I don't really see a few people renting office space as a huge increase to the traffic that we already deal with on a daily basis. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Anna Bullhead, 59 Elm Street. Our property kind of butts Tim's in the back. I would not want any buffers there because I think it's important for security. I might be out in the backyard a while ago. I saw lights over there and I walked over to make sure it was Tim. So, I mean,
You scared me.
yeah, I know, but it was, but we're neighbors. Obviously, I concur with Kim. We live on Elm Street. It's a very busy street. It's probably one of the busiest streets in town. But you have people going out in the morning, you have people coming in the evening. By 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, Elm Street's pretty quiet too. It's not the most quietest street, but it's a lot quieter. And that's pretty much what he's talking about. If he wanted to put a nightclub in or something like that where we'd have a lot of traffic at night, but that's not the case. He's gonna have people 8 to 5, 8 to 4, normal working people. Probably a lot of us in the neighborhood aren't there either because we're all at work. So
Les, is this something other than what you said the last time?
Well, basically, what it is we've lived there for 43 years. Look out the back window. He made it a before and after ad. Thing's beautiful. That's all I gotta say, beautiful. It's 100% beautiful. I can look out my back window and say, wow. I used to take the go-kart around there, blah, 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 the kids. Beautiful. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else? Okay, so now we open it up for any opponents who wish to comment on the project. I'm assuming, Mr. Melnick, you have?
My name is Pat Melnick. I was here at the last meeting. I represent Teresa and James Kopacki, who are the owners of 69 Elm Street, which is the property right here, which directly abuts this proposed project. I've submitted an opposition to the proposed findings. Attorney Sewald submitted to you today. And out of that opposition, I'd like to bring three main points to your attention that I think the Kopakis are most concerned about. And the first one is stormwater. And Attorney Sewald's correct. I'm not an engineer. They're not engineers. But when I heard the proposal for stormwater and I've read it, part of the majority of the stormwater proposal, from what I can tell, is that the stormwater is to run off on neighboring properties. Some of it, a portion of it is to be contained, but the majority just runs off into neighboring properties. I don't think that's proper, and I think that an independent engineer, which you have the authority to order, should be the one to look at that stormwater plan to make sure it's adequate and to make sure that the neighboring properties are not affected by this. It's essentially a building with a parking lot around it. All the water's got to go somewhere, and if it's going to go on the neighboring properties, we want to know how the neighboring property is going to be affected. And so we do not believe their plan adequately addresses the stormwater requirement. The second issue my clients take is the traffic study. The traffic study that you have indicates that Little Neponset Road potentially has hundreds of cars a day there existing. There's clearly not, it's clearly not used to that extent at this point. You're looking at how this project affects my client's house, which is directly abutting this development. You're looking at it going from a couple trips a day on this small gravel road to hundreds of trips a day for a 90-car parking lot for a distribution center and offices and manufacturing facilities or whatever else they have planned, right through their front yard. So what I would be asking is that this board actually requests that they do a traffic study to see what the traffic is on this road as it exists today, and report to you what it is today versus what it is actually going to be once this is developed. So you have an accurate picture about how this road, if it's used the way they intend, is going to affect my clients, which are right there. You're going from nothing to a huge traffic burden right in their front door. And so I think that's important. And so I asked the board to make that a request. And the third issue, it was brought up by the applicant and yourselves. It's the fact that there's no buffer here. You're required to order that there be a buffer. The fact that it can't be done or it's not feasible, that's not a way to get around it. There's required to be a buffer between this project and between their house. Right now, there's none. There's one tree. Even if you put up 3 evergreens or a couple evergreens there, that still doesn't buffer my clients from this parking lot in this huge industrial project. And the huge increase in Little Napontet Way. So you have lights with all these vehicles coming in, you have lights in the parking lot, you have trucks running, you have the noise associated with all these cars in and out of this parking lot, you have the people using the building and the noise associated with that, and all that should be buffered from the residential building that's been used as a residential building by the Kopakis for the last 20 years from this project. There are other ways around it. They've purchased the land abutting Elm Street. They could go through that land to get to this property, and if they did that, they could make a buffer, and they could buffer my client's property from this project. The buffer is an absolute requirement on all the criteria of special permit, site plan, the commercial requirements. All of them require a buffer, and there's no buffer here. And so those are the three main issues my clients take with this property: the traffic, the stormwater, and the complete lack of a buffer. And I'd also add that we do dispute their rights into Little Napontet Road. That is an issue with us. We believe that we own the rights to Little Napontet Road. One of their theories is that they have rights to Little Napontet Road through to half of the road. That would give them 8 or 9 feet. That doesn't get them the 20 feet required for the fire lane. So without full access to Little Napontet Road, which we dispute they have, they do not have the access to this facility as required under the rules. And for all those reasons, we're asking to deny this application. Do you have any other questions for me?
Not at the moment. Is there anyone else who has, is there anyone in the audience who would like to stand up and comment or oppose the project?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just make a point before you recognize anyone else in the audience. Attorney Melnick has requested the board to hire an engineer to evaluate stormwater and traffic. And with all due respect through you to Mr. Melnick, my experience is that's not an obligation of the board. If the board receives a stormwater engineering study from the applicant and a study that provides some contrasting conclusion from the opponent, and they also receive a traffic study, and there's a study that challenges, then you could request a peer review of those two to try to give you a fair evaluation of which side is more accurate, whether the data is correct and things like that. So in my experience representing cities and towns, it's actually highly out of the ordinary for the board to have to engage a stormwater engineer, a traffic engineer, to take a look at the applicant's material. So just through you, if I may ask, Mr. Melnick, do you intend to hire a stormwater engineer or a traffic engineer?
I do not believe they do it.
I'm sorry?
I do not believe they intend to hire one at this point.
All right. So I just wanted to offer that comment, Mr. Chairman, because I don't think this board has any obligation, and obviously the town dollars are very important. Right. So the cost of 2 consulting engineers to take a look at the applicant when there's really no technical demonstration by the opponent. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I just want to raise a point that we may have discussed, I think, at the last hearing as well, regarding access. Through you, Mr. Melnick, I think the last time we met, back in November, I asked when your clients acquired the property. I think you said 1991. Is that correct?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Right, and I think you would agree with me that the previous use of the property and the access to and from on Little Napontet Road exceeded a period of 20 years?
For a limited purpose.
Well, when you say limited purpose, I mean, that may be a question, that may be an argument. But there was access to and from the warehouse when it was being used for tobacco purposes for more than 20 years before your client acquired the property in 1991.
I believe there's a period of time it wasn't used at all, but before that, there was a period of time.
And Mr. Melnick, are you familiar with Chapter 187 of the Mass General Laws governing easement by prescription?
Generally, yes.
And you're aware that Section 2 of 187 says that easement by prescription could be obtained by open, notorious, continuous, and adverse use for a period of 20 years?
Yes, it is limited to what it was used for that period of time.
Right. Well,
So it was used for a storage facility for 20 years, and it's used for 2 trips a day. You can't expand that use to what's being proposed here.
Right. Well, I mean, we may differ on that, and I think, I may have asked you this question the last time. You understand under Chapter 187, Section 3, that if you want to stop or interrupt the running of the 20 years, you have to send a statutory notice. It has to be posted on the property. It has to be delivered by a deputy sheriff, just like civil actions. You understand that?
I'm with you there, but you're still looking at the underlying use. You're still looking at what it was used for back in the 1920s and what they acquired by prescription. So if it's used for a storage facility on a horse and buggy or a few trips a day, that's what they have by prescription. There probably is some type of access, some limited to that type of use for this facility. My clients didn't stop that. They haven't stopped that. They've allowed that to continue. We're talking about expanding the prescriptive use that you're referencing.
Well,
Way beyond what it was
I guess
previously
if
used
we
for.
were, I frankly don't know the history, I'll defer to the members of the board. But if we look at the historical use, when that warehouse was running full tilt, when the tobacco use of that warehouse, I don't know exactly how many cars, how many employees were there, going to and from. So the question is, if the rights over Little Neponset were fixed at some point before your clients acquired the property, at a time when the warehouse was running full tilt, are you suggesting, I know you're suggesting that somehow or other that's been limited down to a trickle recently. Is that your
It was
argument?
limited back then.
I'm sorry?
I think it was limited back then. It was always limited to a storage facility. This has never been used for more than a storage facility.
No, but I say storage, I'll defer to the applicant to address the question as to the previous use. When it was used for storage, I don't know exactly what the employee count was at the time. All I'm trying to do, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly want to defer to you and the board so you can hear from other people, is to establish that the access issue from where I sit, I can tell you, I have a trial in the land court starting on January 22nd on an issue of easement by prescription, in which clients use property for 45 years with no notice under 187 Section 3. So the reason I want to point that out, Mr. Chairman, is I don't want to suggest that the question of access over Little Neponset is really in question as far as I am concerned, in my legal opinion. So I think, and I don't want to repeat myself regarding stormwater and traffic, but absent a study that challenges the study that's already been filed, I don't think we really are in a position to have to second-guess the applicant's study and cause the town expense. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to just, did anyone in the audience want to comment in opposition to the project? Okay. Paul?
I want to ask Attorney Sewell, at one point in time here, you popped out a number of 100 and some odd people working in that.
400.
400.
Yeah. The letter that's in the record here from General Cigar says that the building, while owned by GCC, the building was used primarily for agricultural purposes, including storage of tobacco, housing of equipment for cigar manufacturing, and office space. In its heyday of tobacco production from the Connecticut River Valley, there were approximately 400 employees working at this facility.
Can I, with that thinking now going forward, whether this is Alan or Tim, how many, I don't have it, it's not right in front of us here because this is all the external drawings. And I will actually, in full transparency, both applicant and the Klopakis requested site visits by the board. I was able to attend a site visit with the Klopakis one morning, and Paul Labby and I went on a site visit with Diamondback Properties and went through the building. How many office spaces are you looking at now and build out? How many offices are you thinking would be in there?
It's pretty much built to suit, but right now we have 6 offices. And if there's one person per office,
Well, I'm not worried, so 6 offices right now. And how many do you think you might have if you were in your wildest dreams? How many offices would be there, in there?
I'd like to have one tenant, sir.
see, I'd like to keep some of it open. If I have, someone that wants to put some cubicles, then there's not gonna be separate offices. It might be one big open area. So it's a hard question to answer without knowing, how many could there fit in there if I did a say a 15 by 20 office, it probably could be 30 or 40 offices in there.
Okay. And your site is limited by, you have 90 parking spaces.
Limited parking spaces anyways, yeah.
So there's no other, okay, so now is our chance to ask questions. You brought it up, Mr. Melnick. And I guess you raised it too, Mr. Seawald, that that Diamondback Properties now owns the property abutting this out to Elm Street?
Yes.
And then you raised,
It's not Diamondback, it's another LLC.
okay,
Another LLC
but it's,
controlled by Mr.
okay. And you, Mr. Melnick, can you say again what you said?
Well, my point was that the idea that it's impossible to buffer this is untrue, because if you didn't use this as the roadway, and you use the alternative roadway, which could be accessed through this front site, you could use this area for the buffer.
Okay, so that, you're asking, you're mentioning that more for the buffering or for the traffic? I mean, would
Well,
that,
it
would
doesn't-
that
it's-
ameliorate, would
it's-
that take care of the traffic or
Well, that would help- that would
some
do-
of the traffic issue?
That would, yeah, that would, if they eliminated this use as the use for the traffic, which use for 90 spots going to and from right in front of their house. I mean, that's, like I said, hundreds of trips a day with trucks, you know, you've heard that even now, there's being, trucks that are delivering at night. So you're gonna have trucks going there, cars throughout all hours of the day. If you eliminated the use of Little Neponset Road, there's no reason you can't access the site through this front parcel, and then it'd give you more room for buffer. So it'd give you the buffer and eliminate the traffic issue. And the criteria says you need a buffer. It's not just do the best you can. It's, you have to have a buffer, and there's no buffer here. So that was my thought.
Well, I think that the need a buffer has probably more to do with a actual new structure than a pre-existing one. But that being said, if we can get some more buffer in there, it's not a bad idea. So Mr. Melnick has raised the idea of possibly a alternative access. Is that something that you all have thought about, considered? Is it something you would even?
It was thought about long ago. It was considered. I've actually had discussions with Mr. Melnick about it. There are some issues with using this. Turning radiuses to get trucks out through here would be a challenge. I'll let Mr. Reynolds talk about that if you're interested to hear it, but it would be difficult to turn through there. First of all, let me just say that Tim is not going to give up his rights in Little Neponset Road. He has rights in the road. The road goes through his property, not through their property. It goes through his property. He has as much right to that road as the Klopakis. That said, we thought about it. There are some zoning issues out through here because this is not an industrial zoned parcel out front here. So and I actually had a discussion about this because your town council has the same issue in another location. And so there are challenges to using this. But if, that's where we left it. We would probably need a zone change here or a variance in order to use that for access.
I'm wondering if there couldn't be a situation where if you did have access through there, that, and this may not necessarily get at exactly what the Klopakis' concern is, but what if, like a lot of buildings and structures like this, you had a sort of a delivery entrance and then a main entrance?
The delivery entrance, if we were going to consider that, would be Little Neponset Road, because that's the straight shot into the site.
So you wouldn't even consider that you'd have a truck entrance here, which would then reduce the impact on, sort of these, as Tim was saying, 2 o'clock in the morning deliveries of electrical equipment.
Can I have one moment?
Yeah.
Please.
Where are the loading docks? I mean,
Loading docks are in the back.
that's one way though.
Yeah, so you go like,
And then that goes away, his argument, that it's not a straight shot then.
yeah.
There are significant challenges. We would, Mr. Reynolds is saying that, that it would make more sense to do a one-way in, one-way out than trying to split the traffic up that way.
Well, if you did one way in and one way out, what if the one way in was just through there?
But then they're going out past.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So, I mean, it would cut down half the traffic. I haven't, you're putting me in a position where I really haven't talked to Tim about whether this is a huge expense to build another road through here. And one, that we haven't really considered fully, because he has rights in this road. It's his road. I mean, if anyone owns this road, it's Tim. As I said, the Kopakis don't even touch the road where it meets Elm Street. You can see right here, this is part of this lot here. And the road, and their first point on the road is right here. And so, if the board's saying that this is what they would like to see, we would.
Well, I'm trying to, I mean, obviously, and I'm only speaking on behalf of myself at this point. I haven't queried my board mates on this, but I mean, to the extent that we can do something like this, which obviously will have benefit to the community. I mean, this is, I've been over there. I mean, the current facing of it, Tim, no disrespect intended, is sort of an eyesore right now because you've got that old building there that's starting to fall down.
Bottom picture.
Yeah.
That's why we want to make it the top picture.
But that being said, and Les, you've got signs in your driveway, go slow, children playing. I mean, you're concerned about vehicle traffic. I mean, if you weren't, you wouldn't have those signs. And so, we've got, potentially trucks, tractor-trailer trucks going 25 feet away from someone's front step. So, I mean, I'm not oblivious to that.
And nor are we.
But on Elm Street.
Nor are we. But, it's an existing site, and it's an existing access that's been there for longer than anybody's been in this.
That being said, yes, but also, over the last 20 years, it's been a minimal amount, and we're not talking about big tractor trailers either.
That's true, and the Kopakis have been fortunate that this has been a vacant building, but they can't expect it to be vacant forever.
Right, but if we can figure out a way that it actually, there's a potential for coexistence and harmony in the community, why not? But I'm looking to you, Mr. Gary, we don't have to necessarily complete everything tonight, but when you say that are you saying it's impossible to even consider something like this, or is it?
Mr. Chair, nothing is impossible. But I will say that we considered it carefully, and the response we got from the Kopakis is, we're going to appeal unless you give up your rights in Little Napontet Road. That was the response we got, and so.
But that's not necessarily a condition that we need to make on any additional, any alternative access to this property. That may happen. You may end up having that lawsuit anyway, right?
Well, but we'd rather have the lawsuit over Little Napontet than having to build another road and then go through a lawsuit. I think that Tim has selected uses that are minimally vehicle intensive, as I said. No building this size is going to be built out without some traffic being added. That's just a fact of life. And, and so when you buy a house on a private road that leads to an industrial site, I just think you can't come and say that we expect no more traffic, and that the owner of the industrial building has to give up his rights in Little Napontet Road. That's unreasonable from my perspective.
So I mean, this is, we're not privy to what you're talking about. So, I mean, what,
I had a meeting with Mr. Melnick at his office and with his father, the other Mr. Melnick, and I presented a proposal to shed some of the traffic if they would agree to support our application and not appeal. That's the value to us that we would get out of building a new road. And Tim had considered that and sent me over to the Melnicks to propose it. And they said no. And so now what will happen would be that we'll be stuck with building a new road and with an appeal. And that's unreasonable. And so, again, if I had assurances from the Klepakis and their attorney that all would be agreed to and we would split the traffic, we're giving them half the traffic. But I'm not going to do that and invite a lawsuit.
so short of having some kind of other access to this property, the board is presented with, as I understand Mr. Brackett's comments to us at the last meeting, the board is presented with a project that's in an industrial zone that is not expanding the building that is there now. They are different uses, but quite frankly, probably are, except for perhaps the traffic, someone sitting at their desk typing on a computer is probably healthier than maybe what those poor people were going through sorting tobacco years and years ago. And so we have to look at then, is the way that's presented to this space from Elm Street, regardless of any argument over who owns it and who has access to it, is it adequate to handle the traffic and the needs of this building? Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And there are issues with respect to this being a pre-existing building. You have a pre-existing access driveway. I can certainly review the history of it. I'm not sure, I don't know exactly when zoning was adopted in the town of Hatfield. It may predate zoning. I'm not sure.
Oh, God,
It
it
does.
predates.
Definitely does predate zoning.
So
Way
if
by
it
years.
predates zoning in total,
By
before the
years.
town even had a bylaw,
Yeah.
then
Exactly.
clearly it's a non-conforming property in many respects.
Pre-existing non-conforming lot. No one would build a building that size in this town or any other town without a right to access that building.
Right.
The access was Littleton Ponset Road. Based upon the historical use, I've spoken to 3 previous select people that were born and raised in Hatfield. I've spoken to numerous people in their 80s that were born.
Hey, you're starting to get around here.
You're not that, you got a long way to go. That were born, lived on Elm Street, born and raised, and every time, I didn't say anything about any project, I just asked the selectmen, tell me, what's Little Neponset Road? And they go, that's a town road. Sewer, water, the town plowed it for numerous years. There were 2 houses down over the hill that had town water and town sewer. And I'm just beyond myself when I say, when I think about somebody, the property to the right, the property to the left, the properties across the street, they knowing that that building has existed for 100 years, that at some point, something's going to happen to that building. Somebody's going to want to repurpose it, and they're going to want to use it. And my question is, why didn't the Klepakis buy it 25 years ago? I know it wasn't for sale. Why didn't they buy it 3 or 4 years ago? Why didn't they put it, why now? Why now are they making a big stink? That's my question. When they didn't make a stink, when they didn't,
What about the traffic on Elm Street that goes by your house? Your house is right on Elm.
Bedrooms in the back. He comes
So-
flying in, flying
but-
out. We got trucks coming in at 2:00 in the morning.
So actually, if I may
An
here,
industrial building.
we don't have,
We've been paying taxes on that road for 20-something
wi-
years.
without, without the,
And
without the
town is proud of it.
excuse me, without an alternative access, we're left to decide on this project given the current access, regardless of what may happen in land court or whatever. So I feel like, you know, for us anyway, if you're not willing to work with them on perhaps some other opportunity for access, our hands are tied. We have to make a decision based on whether or not we feel like this has sufficient, not access, but sufficient, if there's enough sufficient width in this road, which it sounds like there probably would be, given that you own this new property. And, you know, except for, you know, maybe adding in some buffering and so on, I don't see how we can do anything other than approve the project based on that. But if there's,
Our attorney spoke last time, you cannot deny access to a piece of property. You can't deny access, and they've had access for hundreds of years. You can't do anything about it. It's there. It's one of those things you're gonna have to, we can't say no because we can't deny the access to that building. Not that we all are in favor of saying yes, but we can't deny, we can't say no.
so the question then is whether or not you would be in a position or even consider an alternative, but as Mr. Seawald said, why would they consider that alternative if they're still gonna find themselves in court?
Mr. Chairman, just on that point, I just have a couple of questions, if I may, through you to Mr. Melnick. Mr. Melnick, just to repeat, your clients have owned the property since 1991.
Yes.
At no time between 1991 and the present, some 26 years or so we're talking now, they have never sought to seek an injunction to prohibit the use of Little Napontet by the previous owner. Apparently that's General Cigar.
No, because of the limited use.
Because of the so-called limited use. Okay, so that, the answer to that is no.
At any given time, and it was just an occasional trailer truck bringing in tobacco or taking out tobacco.
I'm sorry, is that Mr. Kilpatrick?
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay, thank you.
So there was never an issue, and they knew we owned, part of the road, like Jimmy says, that he owns the front part, but then it slopes off, and then we own supposedly the back half, which I do believe we do when we've been paying taxes on it since I've owned the house. Right towards the back, so we both own it, there's no question about that.
Right, and if I understand your concern, Mr. Melnick, and the reason I'm asking these questions here, Mr. Chairman, is if the board were to render a decision, hypothetically, I'm not suggesting what the board is leaning one way or another on this, but if the board were to approve the special permit, site plan approval, make the required findings, and if Mr. Melnick takes an appeal on behalf of his client, that appeal could take anywhere from 18 months to 3 years. If he goes to the land court, probably a little faster. If he goes to Superior Court, you go to Superior Court, the judge today may be handling a med-mal case, next month may be in a criminal session, next month may be doing a contract case, and all of a sudden, a zoning case comes up. So I don't know if Mr. Melnick, hypothetically, if you're going to appeal, would you go to Superior Court or land court?
Superior Court's closer. Superior Court's closer.
But you'll agree with me that the land court judges have more knowledge of zoning.
We have to drive to Boston, but
Well,
probably.
I can tell you that the judge that I'm trying my case on January 22nd is coming out to Worcester, trying a case in Worcester, because all the parties are in Worcester. And I know the judges of the land court are willing to travel. If they can find a courtroom, they will come from Boston out here. The only reason I suggest that, I'm not encouraging an appeal. I just want to suggest the judges of the land court are specialized judges, and there's a much faster track. But my understanding is you believe that they would be overburdening if they have an easement, let's assume for the sake of this discussion here, rather than in an appeal setting 2 years from now. If they have an easement over that right-of-way for some purpose, you say it's limited, they say it's more expansive, then would you be challenging the proposed use, if the permit is granted, as overburdening that limited use?
Well, we don't agree that there's prescriptive easement at all, but if there is, then we would be saying it's overburdening the easement.
Okay, and do I understand correctly?
There's other issues.
Right.
I mean, there's issues of, if the lot was illegally subdivided, and whether or not it's pre-existing, non-conforming after you illegally subdivide a lot, there's an issue there as well.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard. Did you say that the lot was illegally subdivided?
The lot was improperly subdivided 3 years ago, and there's a question about whether or not this is a pre-existing non-conforming lot when you illegally subdivide a lot.
Right, and please understand, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Melnick, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Mr. Melnick, you would understand that an appeal from an A&R approval in 2014, 3 years ago, the appeal period from that is run. It's expired.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I'm sorry?
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, you'll agree, certiorari under 249, Section 4, you have to file within 60 days. And I would suggest that if there's any appeal from an A&R, it's less than 60 days. So 30 days, 60 days, that passed 2 years, 9 or 10 months ago.
Doesn't apply to this application, though.
Just for the sake of this discussion, because I want the board to be able to fully understand this. So in my opinion, I don't think there's any appeal from the A&R. That's fixed. Mr. Chairman, for your information. So if the A&R, and please interrupt me, any members of the board, if you have questions while I'm discussing it. If the A&R is fixed, as approved, subdividing this lot with frontage on Little Neponset, then do I understand correctly that if your client does not get the applicant to agree to discontinue or give up rights in Little Neponset, you will appeal any decision granting special permit by the board?
I expect they would appeal if there's no buffer placed between their house and the proposed development. I would also expect they'll appeal if the board approves a plan where hundreds of cars are going to be going by their house on a daily basis. I don't think they could live that way, and I would expect they would appeal if that's what's gonna happen to their property. I don't think they're gonna let it go. And regardless of whether you make it a loop or everything comes right through that Little Neponset, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about a humongous amount of traffic.
Doesn't
right
it,
in their
but
front
didn't
yard.
it, can I have your, that sheet of paper I handed you, Paul, earlier? The one. So, but you're, in your, excuse me, please, no. In the remarks that you provided, you said traffic could be mitigated by the applicant constructing a new access way through the adjacent Szymanski property that would mitigate impacts to the abutters. So you're suggesting that as an option?
I think they could access the site exclusively through the Szymanski property. Well, not anymore. What you formerly was the Szymanski property.
So even, but from what I heard, it sounded like even that suggestion was made to you, and you.
No.
You declined it.
No, the suggestion was a loop.
That was my
The suggestion was to
understanding
come in that way and loop out.
We have never agreed to give up our rights in Little Neponset Road.
No, that's not what this says. This doesn't
Oh, I
say.
agree with you.
Yeah, this doesn't say that you would give, that, it just says traffic could be mitigated by the applicant constructing a new access way. So if the primary access way without, and still, them not requiring them to give up any rights to Little Neponset Road, if the majority of the traffic was coming through the other way, I mean, the fact of the matter is that you do have an industrially zoned parcel of land behind you with a big industrial building on it. We're not talking about putting in a new building. So now it's just how can we ensure that they're doing what, in all likelihood, they're rightfully allowed to do without having as minimal impact on your house as possible. And it could be that you get nothing out of this as opposed to getting something out of it.
If you're looking for an answer, you're looking at putting in a 90-car parking lot. You're not adding a building, but you're adding a 90-car parking lot.
Right, but if the majority of the traffic went through another way, you didn't give up all, and only a smaller amount came through here.
You're looking at a big loop with trucks going in and coming out right past your house.
There's no way of doing it without having the trucks loop back through to that?
There's not adequate room for trucks to turn around.
Where would they be, they don't need to turn around, the docks are in the back, aren't they? Wouldn't they just come all?
get out?
Yeah, there's not enough room in the back of the site to do well.
No, what if they came all the way around and then in front of the,
I don't think these, if they came around this way, I don't think the turning radiuses here are gonna.
that's my question, is would they
Right,
be
I don't
able?
think the turning rate, is that, Terry, can you- if the trucks are coming in this way, hitting the dock, and then heading back out this way, and then turning to go that way.
Why can't they go back out the way they came in?
I mean, if they came in this way?
Yeah, if they came in that way and went back to the loading docks, went back out and went back out.
No, just, Mr. Seawall, just continue the way you went around the building.
Well, I mean, you have parking over here.
But the trucks are doing that now
What would
anyway,
make
right?
sense, yeah, the trucks come in and go around the building and go back out.
Right, yeah, so now have them just do that same loop that you just did, coming
they go
around
back?
and then going back out.
You're saying this way.
Yeah,
I mean, you could look at it, you're not gonna have any buffer, you're still gonna have the trucks going, this way.
well, no, but the trucks,
You're gonna
no,
have less buffer going that way, but,
well, no, why would you have less buffer?
because you're gonna have to have a radius. The truck is gonna have to come out this way to get in. I don't know that I can make it work for him to come through here, probably, but I don't know.
Right,
I
but
still
the,
have the question of why can't you go back out the way you come in? If you're gonna back to a loading dock and come back out, why can't you go back out that
Because the
way?
trucks
Have
get
you gotta
back
go
in,
one way?
the trucks can't make this maneuver so easily with other cars. It's very difficult.
Okay.
We waive the parking spaces. You have to have 9.
yeah, well, we don't, well, that's, true, we could,
I'm not sure that'd be a waiver, that might be a dimensional variance, Mr. Chairman. If the table of parking regulations requires X number of parking spaces, I would have to check and
I
see
think
whether
we
you
can
waive
waive
or
some.
no, it does, it says, we can.
You can,
we
I
can-
haven't had
yeah,
a chance to,
yeah,
so you may
we-
be able to waive that.
Yeah,
Can I, if I may, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, just ask a couple of brief questions back to Mr. Melnick, and I
Okay.
appreciate the time. I'm not trying to take up too much time. Mr. Melnick, I'm not asking you to concede anything that I'm going to use against you in a future appeal if that happens, but would you agree with me that my advice to this board is they don't have the authority to prevent use of Little Neponset Road? Now, do you have any argument to challenge my opinion to them? They could not include a condition that says, you have to come in on an access road across the Elm Street property. You are prohibited from using Little Neponset Road for access to and egress from the site for this use.
I believe you could prohibit that because one of the criteria is to look at the impact on neighboring residential houses.
Right, but wouldn't that be affecting ownership rights? We talked earlier about the easement by prescription. If that's already established by statute, by the Massachusetts General Law 187, Section 2, my opinion to the board is they could not extinguish an easement by prescription by adding a condition to their decision. So I'm just asking you, can you tell me what your argument would be to challenge my opinion to the board?
You're asking me, assuming that they have rights to the road, and we're not conceding that, but
No, well, my opinion to the board is tonight, I don't have any problem saying to the board, they have rights to the road. Easement by prescription, 187, Section 2. My suggestion is, I'm asking you, with all due respect, as I said in this forum, Mr. Seawald can respond as necessary. I'm just asking you, I'm going to give an opinion to the board, and when we write an opinion, I will say, this board has no authority to limit access over Little Neponset Road that is currently held by Mr. Paciorek as a successor owner for a property that's been there for 100 years. So I'm just curious, I'm just asking you, what would be your argument that that this board has that authority to prohibit that right?
Can we waive it or not?
if you're asking if they have, right, if you're saying they're assuming they have 20 feet of road, full access to their property, then there is no argument, because you're making that assumption.
Okay.
But there are other reasons to deny this application, such as the buffering, such as the detrimental use to the neighboring properties.
Well, you may remember at the last meeting, I was the one that asked Attorney Seawald to provide all the documentation that we received on Saturday that was sent to Ms. Davis, and addressing the special permit criteria, the site plan criteria, the commercial use criteria. And then you provided your response today. So I can tell you that in the final analysis with the board, we're going to go through each and every criteria. We're not going to miss anything. The second issue, and I want to make this, I want to use this example, Mr. Chairman, and I don't want to say it in a humorous vein. I want to say it just as an example of a case I had regarding a pre-existing non-conforming use. I was town council for the town of Bolton, which is near 495 and the Mass Pike. There was a pre-existing pig farm right along the border of 495. Somebody bought up adjoining property, put in a single-family residential development. The houses ran anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million. People moved in and they started complaining about the smells from the pig farm. And as I said, I'm not trying to be humorous. I'm trying to suggest that, you know, there's a certain element of buyer beware here. There's a certain element of protection of pre-existing buildings, pre-existing uses. And we basically had to say to the residents who came to the Board of Health complaining that if the pig farm's being operated in accordance with all the applicable Board of Health standards, Department of Agriculture standards, then you own a home within, if on warm weather, within an area where you can smell the pig farm. Now, with all due respect to Mr. and Mrs. Klepacki, I don't mean any disrespect to them. They purchased the property. I mean, if we were going in to look at that property tomorrow to buy it and you saw the building out back, you'd probably say, what is that? What's there? How do they get in and out of there? There's a driveway. And then if you've been living there since 1991 and you're seeing some degree of traffic go back and forth, this building and the use is not a surprise. So one of the suggestions I would have, Mr. Chairman, is, as you and we spoke earlier today, just reviewing the material that have been submitted by Attorney Seawald and Attorney Melnick, is, just for the board's information, for special permits, you have to open the public hearing within 65 days of the application. You have an open period of time during which you can consider the special permit. When you close the public hearing, you have 90 days to render a decision. Now, I'm not trying to drag this thing out because I think both parties would like to get a decision. I'm sure the board wants to resolve it. But in light of the information you've received tonight, one of the recommendations I would have is you could either keep the public hearing open to possibly receive a report from the police and fire chief about this proposed second means of access. I understand Mr. Seawald has said, you know, under the circumstances, it presents problems. From a police and fire point of view, if they were to take a look at the information that's provided, it may be a problem for public safety access, police, fire, emergency services, getting in and out of the second driveway. If Little Neponset provides the best access in and out, well, you may want to receive that as part of your public hearing. You could keep the public hearing open to your next meeting for that limited purpose, to receive police and fire input on a second access. But as I said, for that limited purpose, and of course, if we receive reports, Mr. Melnick could get copies. He could provide a response either on his own or with a traffic engineer or someone else. When you close your public hearing, if you decide to close your hearing tonight or you decide to continue it to January, when you close your public hearing, you could then immediately begin your deliberation the same night. And in the meantime, I would have an opportunity to take a look at all the materials I received on Monday from Attorney Seawald, today from Attorney Melnick, and then be able to provide you with a memorandum regarding the proposed findings and whether they meet the criteria, and the challenges that Mr. Melnick has submitted with his documents. As your counsel, I can provide you with a confidential memorandum. I can send it to all of you in advance of the January meeting. I can communicate with each of you. You, under the open meeting law, you're not allowed to speak to no more than one other member of the board. If you were to talk to two other members of the board between now and January, that would technically be a violation. So you should be considering these issues independently on your own. But at the January meeting, we could then receive the police and fire report. You could then review my report of the submissions. You could close your public hearing and begin deliberating the same night. And then if you render a decision, we then have, as I said, I have a period of time to prepare a written decision that I can come back for your review and approval. Because the statute, since it was adopted in 1975, provides that period of time, 65 days to start the public hearing. You have an open period to hold the hearing and continue it, and then when you close it, 90 days to file your decision with the town clerk. So that's just to provide you with a little bit of room, because the whole purpose here is, if Mr. Melnick and his clients are intent on filing an appeal, obviously, what I want to recommend to you is we invest the time now to make sure there are no procedural defects in this decision. Because if a case is taken up on appeal, whether it's to the Superior Court locally or the Land Court in Boston, the court holds under the statute, Chapter 48, Section 17, the court holds what's called a de novo hearing. And all the judge has before him or her is the decision. They hear this whole case all over again. Everything that the applicant has presented is presented to the judge. Everything Mr. Melnick wants to present by way of challenge is presented to the judge. And when the judge is finished with the hearing, whether it takes 3 hours or it takes 3 days, the judge looks at the decision and determines whether everything that he or she has heard either justifies the special permit being issued, or the decision should be annulled and remanded back to this board for further proceeding. So we want to make sure the final decision meets all the statutory requirements regarding special permit, site plan, et cetera, so that and I'm not going to suggest, I've been doing this for a few years, if there's a strong chance of an appeal, I'm not going to give the appealing attorney an opportunity to challenge the decision because we missed one criterion or we forgot to include one proposed finding. We want to make sure the decision is tight as possible going up.
So, if I may, and it is getting late, if we may, this other alternative route, you were talking about the trucks having to make this turn in front of the office, but don't they make that turn coming off of Little Neponset Road? Because you have a one-way road, right? They're coming off of Little Neponset and making a left turn in front of the office, right? So if they came in off of a new access and just did the loop, and they went in front of the office to then make that left turn out, I don't know why it would change. I mean, they're making a left turn there, they would be making a right turn in the same space, right? Isn't it basically the same space?
No, I mean, it isn't. It's a new radius coming off of the front of the building. You know, so you got the tractor trailer that comes behind it that you need about 50-foot radius coming from where the turn starts.
So you have this.
So it wouldn't necessarily be in the same space. So if you come off of here, you're gonna have a radius that comes off in here, and the truck's gonna be over in here.
Okay.
And then it's gotta do the same thing to get through here.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's
you end up with needing to do a lot more maneuver room to get through between the barns.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have to do sort of an S maneuver to get it through there. But, I mean, it's doable, it's not ideal. You know, I guess would be my response.
And it's not worth even your time to do it if indeed there's still going to be a claim against the road.
That idea
I can't guarantee
probably
it.
work.
What?
That we would probably agree to. If they're coming in, doing a loop and going back out the same way, that would probably could work something out there.
Right, but it sounds like you wouldn't even.
Yes, we would agree.
Right, but would you agree
Little
without?
Neponset Road?
But would you agree to that without also requiring that they give up any rights that they currently have, or?
They wouldn't need to use Little Neponset.
Well, they wouldn't, but they could.
Crux of the matter, right
but
there.
they could
That's
still.
that's the crux of the matter.
If they could use, I mean, they don't want to give up their whatever rights they have to Little Neponset Road.
If they do it that way, they can put up a buffer, so my clients don't have to see this every day. They can get in and out
But
the same way.
they still are not gonna want to give up the access to Little Neponset Road.
Doesn't matter.
They-
That's right.
I mean,
They
they
will
could,
put it in, okay, and give you a out and in, but they're still gonna be able to use Little Neponset Road because they're not gonna give up that.
I mean, they may only use that, it may only be a few cars or a couple, but the majority of the traffic would come through here. The trucks and,
Did you hear that, Bob?
what's that?
Listen to what she
Yeah.
said. Hear that.
Right, well, that's what we said, that's what I said earlier, like a delivery entrance. Well, a delivery entrance here, right?
Yeah, that would work. Put in a buffer, make all the majority of the traffic go around the loop, go back out through.
What about an office worker?
You know, if we're talking about trucks,
Office
the
worker.
truth is, we're talking about a limited number of trucks.
Well, but we're also
Very.
talking about, as Tim said, you do have these deliveries that come in at 2 o'clock in the morning. If the deliveries were coming in, if these deliveries were coming in through that other
stop
entrance, no, Tim said it's all whenever they can get their stuff and their supplies, and, you know, so if the commercial traffic, I just heard them say, if the commercial traffic came in through there, now, the buffering is, I mean, there's a limited opportunity here for buffering, but I think if you could do some more shrubs or bushes or something, but again, I mean.
You'd even be happy to put shrubs on the other side of the road to buffer this. I mean, if that's really the issue, we'll put a line over here. We would be happy to put, I mean,
Buffer on the Klopaki's property.
we'll
That's
put
on
it
their
on the
property,
Klopaki's
though.
property. I have no problem with that.
Huh? With the loop, if we could do this loop thing that took the majority of the commercial, like I said earlier, there's a lot of, excuse me, guys in the back, take it out in the hallway if you want it, but there's more than enough commercial and industrial establishments where there's a delivery entrance, if you will.
I understand, but there
Yeah.
is such a limited truck traffic here that you're asking him to build a whole new road for probably 3 or 4 trucks a week.
Well, what if you had then have that be where the majority of the access is, through there? Then you don't have to risk going to land, because the
No,
thing
because
is.
we'll be if they're telling me that the few trucks that come in coming in here and all the other traffic's coming in this way.
No, I just said,
Well,
no.
but I don't think Tim's giving up the right to access
No,
this site through.
no, listen, what I'm hoping is that if you have all of the access be there, through there, right, around, right, but you are not required to give up your rights to Little Neponset Road.
And go back out that.
Yeah,
So when customers, whoever, start going back out Little Neponset Road, are we gonna hear from the
well,
Kobakis?
it's no different than what we dealt with CNS. You have some signage there to make it really clear for the people that are, you know, are the repeat offenders. It's like, hey, guys, you go around. I mean, we.
Today lost on North Hatfield Road, so
Yeah.
your signage doesn't work.
Well, but,
Sorry.
no, but this is an interior, it's a closed setting here. I mean,
My property is on the other side of this, so if you're talking about community support here, I do not support that. And I live in the back, and I do not hear any of those trucks that come through. And I am exclusively in the back of that building.
So you're just foisting this on someone else, and
why would
she-
you be opposed to that? It's across the street from you, right?
It's right next door.
But she was in support
All
of it
they're doing
last
is
time.
passing the
Right,
cookie down
and-
and making a
Of
road
it being
next
on,
door.
in our yard.
Well, you bought a house on a way that leads to an industrial building.
No, but wait a second, your house is how far away from where this road would be?
They'll have a barn in between.
I'm at 61 Elm Street, and this new road is proposed between two barns. There's two barns.
Right, so is that 25 feet from your front door?
No. On a pre-existing road?
No, is it 25 feet from your,
Right, it would be.
it would
So
be?
we're talking about new kinds of buffers.
No, would it be 25 feet from your door?
This new road?
Yeah.
Would be 25 feet past.
No, it can't, the barn is probably 25 feet wide, and it's on the other side of the barn.
Side of the tobacco barn.
Right, yeah, so how close is that
Excuse me,
to?
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yeah.
just make a point of order? Ladies and gentlemen, everyone speaking has to first ask to be identified and be recognized by the chair. If the chair is having a back and forth with one person, others shouldn't be interrupting or speaking, because the other board members are trying to follow this along as well. So please,
One at a time.
please ask to be, raise your hand, ask to be recognized by the chair, and then all comments have to go through the chair, please.
So, ma'am, if you would stand up again. So,
Ask her name for the
yeah,
record.
My name is Ann Lanning, and I live at 61 Elm Street.
okay, so,
I'm a butter.
right. And this, if this new access road went between the two barns, so how close would, there's a, and you're on the property that's zoned industrial, right? Yeah, so that's an industrially zoned property.
But you're looking at other kinds of barriers and buffers for my.
Well, but you have the barn there, right? The barn that I've been told buffers this from Elm Street. So that's going to buffer it through, as it goes past the barn to your property. And then it would be just where it goes out, like a driveway going out. But you're a good distance away, right?
But you're now saying that there are going to be trucks that are coming between those two barns as opposed to using a pre-existing road, which was built for that. That's what I'm saying. I'm hearing conversation that there's no problem making this new access road. It makes absolutely no sense. There's an existing road that these trucks can come in and out of. They do now. I live there. I do not hear any of this traffic in the back.
Well,
That's all I'm saying.
right, but but we're not talking about hearing the traffic. We're talking about, no, we're talking about having the traffic drive within 25 feet of your front door.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
can I make a motion that we continue the public hearing with Mr. Brackett's recommendation that we do a little bit of research, as it will, with the police and fire? The town clerk not having whether or not she has a book of town roads.
I have a copy from the state regarding the A&R plan. I'd like to just address that. I was on the board at the time.
I'll
with
table that
two previous
motion.
members. Two of them are deceased who are longtime residents. One was Mr. Corey Bardwell and Greg Winters. And that A&R was based upon the fact that a document was received from the state of Massachusetts, the State Highway Department, and it's dated 4/26/2010. And it lists all the towns in the town of, all the streets in the town of Hatfield with a code of number 2, which means it's a town-approved road. And lo and behold, on this list is Little Neponset Road from Elm Court to Scotland Road, a number 2. Little Neponset Road, Elm Street, Little Neponset Road, a number 2. So based upon this information, plus based upon 3 members of the board, Mr. Bartlett, who had 40 years, Mr. Corey Bardwell, who had, I don't know how many, 30, 40 years, Mr. Greg Winters, I think, had 25 years. We had over 100 years of experience on the planning board, town residents, longtime town residents, who knew every street, every farmer, every stone unturned. That was the decision for the A&R. And they said it was a town road. The town maintained it, the town plowed it for 100 years, and there was sewer, town sewer, and town water on it. So the A&R plan was not made in error. It was based upon the information, the most accurate information that we had at the time.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I agree
Okay.
with your,
So I was going to make a motion
Yeah.
that we continue with that possibility with the police and fire access, and also if the third condition would be if the change in use, if someone can possibly research case law, land court case law, where the change of use changes the access to a property, because that was mentioned early on by Mr. Melnick. And we can continue the public hearing after finding out about those 3 issues. Because it seems like right now we're kind of bumping heads with whether or not Mr. Pachoric has access, whether or not he's willing to create a second access, which really isn't fair, because what if he didn't own that property? He just purchased, or another corporation he may own purchased that property. He would have had access to that property without his recent purchase. I don't think that should be really considered a part of this. That's just almost an option.
If I could speak to that. You know, we're here today talking like these two parcels are owned by the same entity. They're not. I admit that there's control. But what you're doing is telling Diamondback that they have to enlist the property of someone else to create a second access. And, you know, we were willing to talk about that, and we were sent packing. And so now here we are facing another month delay because we were sent packing when I made an effort to go over and meet with the Melnicks. Now, you know, if we're talking about truck traffic, we are literally talking about 2 to 3 trucks a week, maybe. And I would suggest to Tim that if you want to limit trucks entering that site to 10 a week, 2 a day, no more than 2 a day, that is not such an imposition along Little Neponset Road. 2 a day. We're not talking about huge truck traffic here. We're not talking about huge traffic at all. And we are providing the parking, and Mr. Melnick keeps talking about 90 parks. Well, we're trying to provide the parking that is based upon some formula that's in your bylaw, not on what we really expect to need for parking. And so they're overblowing the traffic here enormously. There is an occasional truck coming in here at night to deliver electrical supplies. It comes in, it goes behind the building, delivers the supplies, and goes out at 2 in the morning. It's not a tractor-trailer truck, it's a box truck. We will limit tractor-trailer trucks to no more than 2 a day down Little Neponset Road. But what, you know, I feel like we're being forced into using this property, which perhaps Tim bought for a different purpose.
Well, you're not being forced into it. We just raised it.
I understand.
And, no,
And I agree, it shouldn't be considered. If we want to offer it, that's for us to do. But I respectfully suggest that the board cannot pressure Tim into placing this into service of this lot. They're owned by 2 different entities. And, you know, and look, we were willing to give up some rights here on this property and devote some of this property to the back property if we were getting something. But we're not getting anything.
okay, but we, fine. We were not aware of your conversations you told us tonight. Okay, so I want to close the.
Based on the suggestion, on the suggested motion, number one, I don't think you're in a position to close the public hearing and begin deliberating and deciding tonight.
Right.
So the matter is going to be continued to your next hearing. So the motion, I think, is very appropriate. If Mr. Seawald just wants to provide further information to the board in the same way he sent to Ms. Davis before regarding this proposal, and if Mr. Melnick wants to respond, if there's, let's assume 2 options. One is use of an access over the Elm Street property or using with an in and out of some fashion, and the second option is use of Little Neponset. What, in addition to what they've already presented, if their suggestion is it's 2 different entities, 2 different properties, it's too expensive, et cetera, this is what we'll do to buffer, as Ms. Klepacki mentioned earlier. She's concerned about buffering. I think I heard you, through you, Mr. Chairman, I heard her correctly. If let's assume, and this is just in preparation for the next meeting, not for discussion tonight, let's assume that Little Neponset is the only in and out. The police and fire chief agree that that's the best access, most direct access. What I would just suggest through you, Mr. Chairman, is a recommendation to spare the parties not only the time and expense, and for those people in the audience who are not aware, if the board grants a special permit and it goes up on appeal, the town doesn't have to pay me to defend that appeal. Attorney Seawald defends that appeal. Attorney Melnick is the petitioner. I file what's called a nominal appearance. I don't even go up to court. I don't even go to court. Mr. Seawald has to carry the burden to defend the board's position, Mr. Melnick. But what I would suggest through you is Mr. Melnick and his client ought to talk, because if they're the only property owner and they're the only ones that are going to have to bear the burden of the expense of this appeal, not only is it going to be time-consuming, it's going to be expensive. So I would, and I can tell you, depending upon whether it's Superior Court or Land Court, you may have to wait. You could have a trial tomorrow. You may have to wait 3, 6, 9 months to get a decision, which is just dead time. You're just sitting there. So I would just, my last comment, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to be long-winded. I would just, through you to Mr. Klepacki, Ms. Klepacki, Mr. Klepacki, and Attorney Melnick, ask them to negotiate in good faith with Attorney Seawald, Attorney Albano, Mr. Pacioric, and their people, because we now have approximately a month. They can sit down across the table, trying to negotiate it. If this case was filed in the Superior Court or the Land Court, one of the first things the judge asks is, are the parties willing to consider alternative dispute resolution? Mediation, arbitration. It's quicker. You don't have to wait all that time for a trial. You don't have to wait all that time for a decision. I'm suggesting that they try to engage in some mediation of some sort, not that they need a third party, but they engage in mediation between now and your January meeting. Because I don't know if Mr. and Mrs. Klepacki have been involved in litigation. It's time-consuming, it's draining, it's expensive, there's an emotional burden. And frankly, the time would be better spent now talking than taking an appeal that's going to be unproductive. Thank you.
So there's a motion on the table that Ron made with the 3 items. I think there were 3 items to have researched or requested. Is there a second of that?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay, so 4 ayes and 1 nay.
And the next meeting?
Is January 3rd.
January 3rd.
Mr. Chairman, if I don't mean to inconvenience the board. I'm going to be away on the 3rd with my family. Is there any chance of, I don't know if you've already got matters noticed?
Actually, you know what? We changed it to the 10th.
Oh, the 10th?
We've already
I can
changed
be
it
here
to
on
the 10th. Yeah.
Oh, that works, so thank you.
Yeah, we already, because of another issue, changed it to the 10th.
The 10th is okay.
Yeah. Okay. We can make it right at 6:30.
Based upon the decision.
So,
We already voted, but
access, emergency access.
So I hope that there is the opportunity for you guys to maybe have
please
a,
hold it down.
Public road.
I hope
They
that
might not have
you
one.
take
They're
Mr.
supposed to.
Mr. Brackett's suggestion at heart and maybe have a way of talking about this, particularly as it relates to your last comment about the trucks and also the landscaping perhaps on either side of the road. Okay, thank you.
there's going to be an appeal.
Hey, we still have items on our agenda, so if you could vacate the space as soon as possible, that would be great. I lost my.
I'd like to take it back, mind?
Yeah. Yeah, you can take all of this.
I'm just going to run this over to the office, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Watch your microphone, guys, please. We have
Oh,
to.
that's very helpful, yeah. No, if you have any
Brian?
Because
Brian Flynn?
Yeah. One more, this is it, I think.
Well, you
Oh,
got
no,
Big
there's-
D here. You got
yeah,
another
right,
guy.
Yep, yep.
Brian.
Yep.
Brandon LeBlanc.
Your road representative, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
A few papers that
Yeah.
a few maps, GIS maps.
We weren't getting anywhere.
No, you're right. Go on.
Unfortunately, I think I only have 5.
That's all you need.
Perfect.
Well, Brian, I saw your issue, and
Yep.
the reason why you have frontage on Depot, but the reason why you have a shared driveway is because of the wetlands.
Yes, so the wetlands that are actually delineated here are down in this lower area.
Yeah?
And this area here is marked as a hydrologic connection.
Uh-huh.
So I wasn't under the impression that
Is
this
this the lot,
was-
is this the lot you're thinking of?
This is the lot,
Okay.
yes. It's the back lot of these two.
Can I ask you, though, why you don't want to use a shared driveway?
For a couple reasons. One, the expense of building a 20-foot wide access road, which is the proposed road to these buildings.
It's not, who's proposed the road?
This is the proposed plan as the lot's being sold currently. That's
I
what.
think it has to be, the common driveway, I don't believe our bylaw requires a 20-foot wide driveway. We passed a common driveway bylaw.
There's some up on Old Stage Roads that are narrower than that with 5 or 6 offshoots of that. Of course, they were run probably before zoning.
Well, we adopted a common bylaw, a common driveway bylaw. Actually, we decided after this project, I think, to ensure that,
I can't talk about this, actually. I have to excuse myself.
Yeah, you gotta get out of here. You can't be.
Good night.
thank you. Yeah.
Which one?
Have a good night.
You get mine?
But this A and R, this A and R was
Drive safely.
granted
You too.
because of the use of a common drive.
We granted this with the use of a common drive for a couple reasons, Brian. It was
Okay.
the wetlands and the need for the drainage, the culvert that runs along the road,
Yep.
and also not wanting to get more curb cuts out onto Depot Road on that curve
Okay.
from a safety standpoint.
Okay.
And so it was our feeling, because I was on the board,
I was.
Ron was on the board, Paul Dosta was on the board, but he had to recuse himself because he's
Yeah.
related to Mr. Brusco. And so we agreed to use the frontage off of Depot Road, but come off of Straits Road because it was safer and less environmental impact.
Okay.
And so that was the approval that we gave for these two lots. And now,
He's drawn in.
yeah.
Yeah,
and-
that's just a drawn-in proposal of where I would think to put the driveway. It's in a more level area running down from that plateaued back lot. That would have less of a slope running out into Depot Road with minimal impact to that drainage trench that runs along Depot.
Right, but even if this was a 20-foot common wide driveway, you'd be sharing the construction and the cost of that with the other homeowner.
Once somebody buys that, you have to then convey that to them. And it's an argument up and down whether or not they actually have to pay it. I'm gonna have to front that off the bat, and there's nothing saying that I can legally bind the next owner of that lot
Oh,
to
no,
pay
the-
me.
Which lot are you talking about? B?
I'm talking the back lot.
The B.
Yeah.
So in order to build on that back lot, I'd have to front the cost of that common driveway to build all the way back to that back lot.
I'm sorry. Think the seller put the driveway in for you.
Yeah, I mean, the seller is trying to sell, it's our understanding that the seller wanted to sell these two lots using a common driveway.
Yes.
So why isn't the seller putting in the common drive? He has nothing to sell if he doesn't put in the driveway.
I thought I don't know, but didn't he, wasn't he he gonna build a driveway?
Yes, he
Yes.
was actually proposing a 6-townhouse.
No, I know
No,
that.
no, but
But before, when we gave him when the board gave the permission,
Were there plans for a driveway being put in?
yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought he built the driveway, but I guess maybe he didn't, I don't know.
I mean, he can't,
As an incentive to sell those 2 lots.
right, he's got no incentive to sell, I mean,
Why can't he go
Yep.
this way?
Because it's wetlands. You
there's
gotta go across
wetlands and also
and
we
there's a-
were
there's a
concerned
drainage
about,
thing
we were concerned about the traffic safety on Depot Road, to have 2
coming out,
more
'cause that's coming
driveways
across,
coming out of
Just
there.
right at that bend. When you come over the hill, just
It'd
as
be
you go
one
down,
of-
it's right there.
What?
Oh,
Going out.
Well, no, because then this person could argue that they want to go out that way too, and not,
That's not very feasible on that lot. It'd be a huge financial burden compared to going to Straits Road.
I think you're
For,
looking
for
at
that
this-
lot specifically.
I think you're looking at the same burden. I mean, the environmental permitting alone, you know, because it's a resource area, you're gonna
I
have
think it was
to,
a class 2
yeah,
action in that area.
you're gonna impact the wetland, which means you're gonna have to replace the wetland somewhere else. You have to replicate the wetland that you're impacting. It's, you could talk to an environmental consultant and at least, you know, put it in front of a professional, see what a professional says. But again, you know, we signed off on this A&R because of the shared driveway. We never really considered there to be a driveway feasible.
Did you ask the seller if he was gonna put the driveway in?
I have not yet.
Maybe you oughta. Because if he said he was gonna put the driveway in,
Yep.
you know, that was his,
that's why he got the A&R.
that was his plan, was to put a driveway in so he could sell those 2 lots coming off of Straits Road.
It'd be a lot more appealing if it was building a driveway from the property line back to the house.
Right, right, yeah,
That's the
this
only,
part.
that's the only detriment to me, which is why I have proposed the other driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was, the owner of the property was willing to build that common driveway out to the property line of that first property, it would be a lot more appealing.
And you haven't
we'll
asked
see
him that?
I have not yet.
Yeah, because
That's a discussion
again,
that needs to be
again,
had.
this was, we had a long conversation about this, and we were addressing both the environmental impacts as is reflected in the minutes, and the safety issues along Depot Road.
Okay.
And those don't go away.
Yeah, yeah.
Those don't.
understand.
Yeah. So I think you should go back and, you know, talk to the seller, because that was always our impression, was that he was gonna put, just like he was gonna put the road in for 6 townhouses, he was gonna put a driveway in
To
and
sell
sell
the
2
lots.
lots.
Now, you gotta be clear when you talk to him, okay, about where you want him to build that road to. Do you
Yep.
want him to build that road to your property, or do you want him to build that road to lot 1?
Gotcha.
Okay?
Yep.
Be cautious about, because if you say, well, you're gonna have to put your driveway in from your lot anyway, I mean, that's a known
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah, but
see if
do I
he's
have to
gonna
build
bring it up to
It's a
there.
20-foot common driveway to the property line.
Right, to the property line.
Then you
Yep.
can see
Yeah,
it.
to the
Right.
property
Yeah.
line, yeah, right, to your property line.
Yes.
Right.
Property
And that's
line you're
what,
buying.
and that's what we approved, was that he would put in a common driveway to access those 2 lots.
Okay.
Off we go, into the wild blue
Okay.
yonder.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
Thanks,
luck.
Brian.
Good
to
luck
see
with
you
that.
again.
Can keep those if you
Yeah.
want.
No, that's okay, thanks.
I'm usually in bed at
Okay.
8. It's 25 minutes
Keep one
to 10.
set,
I'm
yeah.
in uncharted
Here's
waters
actually
here. You are
photos of
kidding
the
me.
area that the driveway would.
Way in uncharted waters.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry you
Thanks
had
for
to
your
wait as long as you did.
Oh, no problem.
Except your lovely artist.
Now for bed.
All right,
92.
yeah,
I'm gonna go take a ride out there.
excuse me? A dealer license?
Oh, you're Brandon LeBlanc?
Yes.
Okay, he's on the agenda.
Yeah,
Yes, he is. He is on
car
the
lot
agenda. I can't even find the
I'm
agenda.
sorry, you're here to do,
This is it.
oh, okay.
Ask for a deal,
Brandon LeBlanc, Big B's Auto Body, 4B Linseed Road, Linseed Hill Road, excuse me,
Asking for
different piece of ground.
Where are you in relation to Quality Auto?
Right next door.
Are you in Lipinski's building?
Yes.
Steve's building, the
Coming-
big building.
Coming closer to us.
Yeah.
Coming closer to Linseed Road. You're.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
right, okay.
What do you want to know?
I was told I had to come in front of you guys to get the dealer's license.
Well, I don't know if you get the dealer's license from us, but what you get is whether or not we would allow to have a vehicle repair facility there, right?
Yeah, it was an informal meeting to find out if he needs to.
It always was a repair garage.
The selectmen give the license.
Yeah.
It always was a repair garage. Why wouldn't he get it?
They must have thought it's a change in use.
From a change in use?
Well,
From
they-
truck repair to
they-
auto body? I mean,
They referred them to us.
oh, they did? To the Conservation Commission?
No, to the planning board.
Oh,
Yeah, I was told there was already a dealer's license there that he let lapse.
yeah, I'm sure
That's
there
why
was.
I had to come in
Oh,
front
I
of
see.
you guys.
I see, okay, yeah. I had to do that before, yep, you're right.
And so you're doing auto body and you're just auto body repair. You're not doing any car repair, that's what the other two guys.
Yes, yes.
It's turning into quite a little.
So 4.2, motor vehicle repair and service, including boats, recreational vehicles, trailers, and farm and equipment.
Right, and that's,
Site plan review?
no, are you, you have, Wilma, where, we have our zoning map with us?
Oh, I can get it, but.
Yeah,
So, town center,
no, it's not town center, it would be, it's
business,
either business or
Industrial.
industrial or light industrial. up there.
it's not allowed in light industrial for some reason. It's not allowed in agricultural.
So site plan review.
Go down Lincoln Road, and it's the first
Up the hill.
hill.
So I wonder what that was
Lipinski's truck
zoned.
building, bus building and all that,
And
yeah.
then he's next to that.
That's where he is.
Pre-zoning? That was probably pre-zoning.
Oh,
huh?
way before zoning, yeah.
What's his name?
Lipinski, Steve Lipinski.
Garage.
It's the same thing, remember I came to, with Chucky Labby to
Yeah.
redo that, it's the same thing, just to recycle that building, okay? He's gonna do, well, very similar stuff, repairing and auto body stuff, but they let it lapse, so they wanna get back to get the license back, that's all. It's always
What was
been.
that, what was that zone? I can't remember.
That it?
Where,
Oh, Christ,
Jimmy Labby's-
I think it was really residential,
So?
yeah.
but
And
there
it
had
was
been there had always been an auto body shop. at
Right,
Jimmy
it just,
Labby's.
just ran out, that's where Steve Lipinski passed away, his wife never kept up the license, and this man wants to get a license to run it.
So it's, if it's in this triangle here, it's zoned business. The rest
Okay,
of it
so
is, the
it's an
rest of it
SPR.
is outlying residential.
It had to have been zone business when they redid it, because
Right.
it was business there at the time.
Right, there was a business there, and we memorialized all of them in
Yeah,
that, in
right,
that,
yeah, I
in
don't,
the
I don't
master
think he's got
plan.
any problem at all.
So it does, but that building is empty right now, right? No one's using it right now? The building that you're going into?
No, I'm already there. I've been there almost 4 years now.
Oh, but you didn't have a license?
No, I'm going for a dealer's license.
Oh, a
Oh,
dealer?
dealer's
Yes.
license, oh,
Yes.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah, he
to
wants a
actually
used
sell,
car
to
lot.
sell used
Sell
cars?
cars, yes.
Oh, okay, well, then that's different, okay.
Yeah, used car lot, like.
It's a different animal. Although Steve sold and traded and, rented and leased and did everything up there.
What the heck?
It has to be a site plan review
Okay.
because of the
Yeah, it's
parking
allowed.
spaces.
Establishments selling motor vehicles and/or accessories. You're selling cars?
Not at this point, I'd like to.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so that's under, use is 4.9, establishment selling motor, oh, wait a minute, let me back up here. Retail and service uses. So
right.
4.9, establishment selling motor vehicles and/or accessories is allowed in business with an SPA, site plan approval.
Site plan approval.
Display of vehicles in the front yard limited to 7. All our display vehicles must be set back at least 35 feet from the front boundary line. Garage service and/or repair bays must be located on the side or rear of the building. Queuing of vehicles on the site must be accommodated in the side or rear yards of the buildings.
So that's a special permit and site plan review. So you should check in with Wilma about what you're gonna need to do that.
Okay.
And then Wilma, you can provide him with the use table, which provides this specific language about how many can be out in front and all of that.
Okay.
And then we can probably deal with this at the next meeting,
Okay,
okay?
sounds good.
All right, okay,
Thank you.
yep.
He's got more than enough room up there for parking, he's got more than enough room up there for cars.
All right, we have a couple things we need to do before we leave. We have to do our budget.
Yeah.
Wilma and I have gone over this, and do you have the numbers there, Wilma?
These are the numbers for last year. This year right now.
So we did have $1,800 in here for, in case we have to redo the map.
Yeah.
So Wilma feels like what we had last year, 140 for postage, 230 for office supplies, 300 for dues, meeting and training, and $1,800 for other, which is what we would use for the zoning maps, is appropriate for going forward, keeping them at what they are. We didn't really spend much on dues, meeting, and training this past year, but there could be more that we have to attend, particularly with the marijuana bylaw. I've already been to 2 meetings, but they were in Northampton, so I didn't, and they didn't cost anything to go to, I didn't put in for any mileage because they were just in Northampton. So we can leave them at that.
All right, that's good.
I think we had a mileage, this is from 2014, so there was a mileage one on the one which we should make sure gets in there. It was, I think, $300 for mileage. Now, the other thing I wanted to suggest, and again, the select board and the finance committee may shoot this down, but right now, each of us, our stipend is $802, is what the stipend is.
Did anybody get paid this year?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Well, you're not supposed to.
Well,
didn't
you
catch
should,
up yet.
well, you should check in with the treasurer
I
because.
have to
I thought
request
it
to
was
be paid.
volunteer.
No, you should have been paid.
800, it's volunteer.
You might have gotten paid.
You only get about 6.
But anyway, our stipends right now are $802. I'm suggesting that we keep the stipends for the members at $802, but we increase the stipend for the chair, which I know I am right now, but I may not be in the future, to $902, and the vice chair, $852. So $100 more for the chair and $50 more for the vice chair, because having now served in this capacity for a year and a half, there's a fair amount of work that goes on between the meetings. And so I think that it's only fair, particularly in the future, as other members choose to become chair or co-chair, that their level of involvement and activity is recognized.
Why don't you go to 1,900? I mean, why?
Because we were asked to keep our numbers flat from last year, and so we're already asking that we increase it, so.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's
I was
fair.
just gonna suggest the same
My
I
thing.
mean, I would've
recommendation
gone
would
right
be
to-
that the chair have an increase in the co-chairs stay the same.
Nah, you guys need it.
No, I think there's something to be said for this.
What about other boards? What do other boards do?
Yeah, well, they can shoot you down, but you won't get it if you don't ask.
Yeah, I
Right.
think the other boards, the chairs are a little higher than the other members.
Is that how it is with the
They
select board?
usually are,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not against going for the 1,900. I'm
I'm
really
not either.
I'm not against that. I mean, with all the crap that you and I went through in the last 3 weeks, I mean, that's a lot of burden on you,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know, but you're the guy to make the, you're the guy to make the call, but I'm in favor for 1,900.
So am I.
I'll make that as a motion if you want.
I'll second it.
Okay. Then the motion, is there a second? There was a second. The motion is that the chair is at 1,000, the co-chair is at 900, and the members are at, whatever, it's at 802. I'm not sure how that got to that number, odd number. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
802.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Can you ask Laura Lee for me?
Okay, so, we got a notice from,
conflict of interest. Okay.
we got a notice from Marlene that
Chased it down last year.
town meeting warrant articles are due on January 16th. I talked to Marlene, we don't have to have the full language of those, but if we are proposing warrant articles, they need to know by the 16th. And I suspect that we're going to have, at a minimum, we're going to need to put something in for the town meeting regarding marijuana. And so I'm going to share with all of you, as I mentioned, I went to this meeting in Northampton, and I've got some reading material here for you all. This is a chapter from a book that was put together by an attorney here locally on the new marijuana law. That was in your thing. Yeah, actually, that was in your thing. But then also, he provided there's a one-page flow chart on steps for obtaining a license for an establishment, whether that's retail or production or manufacturing, which actually gets to what we would need to do. And then there's a memo that was put together on what cities and towns need to know about the new marijuana law, which is really helpful. And
Wasn't there something gonna be drawn up that they were gonna put in from Marlene and
Oh, I think I got this. This is all in.
wasn't there
included
some
in here. Okay. never mind.
basic article that they were gonna put?
oh,
up
I guess
together?
you did provide, did you provide, maybe you did provide all of these. Okay, they're all in there. These are extras.
May I have a copy? please?
yeah.
This was-
But, so the bottom line is. Oh, I got. My mic fell out. Sorry, Joe. The bottom line is that starting on April 1st, the Cannabis Control Commission can take applications for people interested in retail establishment, production, or manufacturing. If one of those applications comes into them and it's in Hatfield, the Cannabis Control Commission will immediately let us know that there's an application received by them, and they will do their due diligence to see if the person has, prior legal problems, they'll see if they comply with the criteria that's set out for them to get a license. We, upon notice of that there's an application in town, we can provide the Cannabis Commission with information that has a bearing on whether or not that establishment can be in town. So if we had a moratorium in place.
That's what I was talking, that's what I was trying to.
But we're not going to get a moratorium in place, because the first time that we could get a moratorium in place would be at our Maytown meeting.
And that's too late,
That's
right?
too late. And the moratorium can only go till the end of the 2018. So we could still put in a moratorium, but the fact of the matter is that applications are starting April 1st.
Yeah.
If all we have on April 1st is what our current bylaws have, which is that retail establishments have to be in a business zone, this would be considered a retail establishment. Production could perhaps end up in any of the zones. So it behooves us to move forward with putting together some kind of bylaw, unless the select board chooses to opt out of marijuana entirely, but that's going to require both their approving that, and then also then bringing it to the voters.
Town floor, right?
No, not town floor, it's got to go to the vote. It's a ballot measure.
Oh, it's a ballot question.
It's a
Okay.
ballot question. So again, none of that's going to happen before April 1st. So I really think that we should just move forward on looking at how we might amend our bylaws to determine the number of units that we might allow, and then
You mean the number of retail outlets?
retail outlets, the number of where they would be, business or whatever. And one of the things that's in your package is a proposed bylaw. Actually, I believe it's for East Hampton. So ignore the references to numbers in the zoning bylaw because they're for East Hampton. But we could at least start to work off of this. Because again, even if the select board were to choose, which I don't know if they will, but if they were to choose to move in the direction of opt-out, it may fail at the ballot. And if it fails at the ballot, then we're stuck with nothing. So I think we have to move forward with the idea that we're going to have some bylaws. And
For town meeting,
for town meeting.
which is May.
May.
So that gives us
No
4
time.
months.
It gives us enough time. We need to
I
let
know, but
Marlene.
we've got to get that out to the warrant.
We need to just let Marlene know that we're going to have a warrant on
Yeah, have her
on
put it.
January 16th. Get a
Have an
place,
article for the warrant.
get a placeholder, and then we can work on, so it might require us to have another meeting or two in between our hearings.
Sure.
Because we're also then going to have hearings on this. We're going to have to hold at least one hearing, right, before town meeting.
Yeah, we have to have public hearing.
Public hearing. Now, the other thing I will mention is that, I mean, the advantages, and they have gone up, is that it's now you can add up to 3% local tax. And you can also have a establishment agreement, which you can actually charge up to a certain amount, basically a user fee, a one-time fee to get into town,
Like a liquor license.
like a liquor license.
Is there a limit on that? Or we can set?
We can set that for whatever we want. And
Price them right out of the market.
Yeah.
you could price them out of the market, or you could price it in such a way that it sort of, basically that one-time fee is designed to address what you consider to be the immediate impacts on the town of having a retail establishment. Maybe you need to do a little bit more, have some more policing, or you concerned about maybe some education that you use in town with kids and stuff. That money can be used for that. But you can have one-time charge for that and then the tax. And the tax goes to your
So
general
it's not
fund.
a yearly fee like a license to operate an
No.
auto body shop or
No,
anything like that?
no,
It's a
it's
one-time fee
one-time
to get in?
Right. But anyway, I think given the pace at which this is moving and the fact that by April 1st, they could be, and we already know that there's some interest. There's an interest of one individual who's been to the select board twice now about putting in a production facility in Hatfield. Now, that has to be licensed. And so
We have no zoning.
if this person is serious about that, they're going to submit an application on April 1st, and we'll get notice from the Cannabis Control Commission that there's an application in town. So I think we just need to
So,
move forward to be as ready as we possibly can.
so what do you think these towns are doing that, I mean, we're kind of way behind the power curve.
Everyone
regards-
is.
I mean, the whole state is behind the power
Yeah.
curve. If somebody applies for an application October 1st, you don't
They-
have anything because our town meeting's not until May. I mean, what would a town do?
Well, you have, basically, they would use,
Oh, we use our existing.
we use our existing, so we have, for example, under,
Like a retail.
a retail service, small retail establishment, or, convenience store, or whatever.
Kind of a
So,
thing.
so we have,
Yeah, it's a
Convenience
store. It could be in a business.
well, here, it would probably, our package store, for example, is probably the closest thing
Yeah.
to a retail marijuana sales. So that's allowed in town center, it's allowed in town center business, it's allowed in business. Now, so therefore, they could potentially say that they want to have something here.
Over here, across
Over
the
here.
street.
Yeah, but it's
Whereas-
got to be so many feet away from the school, right?
Right. Or
But-
in-
But that's what we want to be ahead of that. So we may say, well, you know what, we don't want it in town center or
it's
town
legal.
center business, we want it just in business. And we want it, and then how far away from a school, how far away from a church, how far away from a liquor establishment. So they're right, it's not right next to a package store or something like that. But otherwise, right now, it would be It would be,
joint and a six-pack.
it would basically be under our current zoning.
Right.
So,
But by the time April 1 comes and May 1st comes, they're not going to be able to get the paperwork together to apply to do that, right?
well, there may be one or two that, I mean, who knows? But I'm thinking about down the road.
Yeah.
And so unless, because even the opt-out, even if we opt out, that's not going to happen before April 1st. And so we may still end up with one.
Somebody
And,
applying.
and again, everybody has their opinion on this. My opinion is that, hey, it's going to happen. And if we can get the kind of money that we potentially could, why not? But that
I
being
agree.
said, I think we need to move forward on some ordinances. And also, I'd like us to also considering and moving forward on the ordinance that Ashley worked up for us on the zoning, the inclusionary zoning.
Yep.
And so we would move forward on consideration of that, and whether or not we vote to put it on the warrant is another matter, but I'd like us to pursue that.
When you went to this meeting, Bob,
Yeah.
was there anybody out, any other towns that have actually, nobody's probably has a bylaw yet?
None of the towns, so some towns have put in moratoriums, and some towns have, I think a couple have already opted out. They voted to opt out, but that's because it didn't pass in their town in the first place.
Yeah.
One town, Amesbury, it didn't pass in their town, it passed in their town by a thin margin, but it failed when it went up for ballot. So it actually, I mean, the measure to opt out failed. And so Amesbury is moving forward with getting bylaw. But none of the towns that were present at the meeting I went to in Northampton had any, the only one that I've read about that's even moving forward, has already moved forward, is Amherst. Amherst at their last town meeting.
Yeah, they said they were, they were.
Yeah.
Do you know where our town fell in when they were voting for?
We
Yeah, I know
approved it. It was very narrow.
It was a narrow margin.
It was very narrow. It was the narrowest of all of those referendums.
Oh, you don't want to keep that?
Beckett was the highest.
It was.
Beckett was, yeah.
It was a narrow victory, but it was a victory.
But it was a victory,
Which means that
nonetheless.
you have to go through the other opt-out step.
I got a question on it.
Yeah.
If you allow growing,
Mm-hmm.
is it gonna have to be done inside? Or are we gonna allow it to be done outside and fenced in and everything?
We could choose to only allow inside.
Okay.
And we could, and so there's two types of inside. There's obviously the building that Mr. Pachoric has, could be growing,
Oh, yeah.
or a greenhouse, a new structure.
Right.
New structure. So we could choose to not allow any outdoor and just have indoor.
I would go with that because, you got it outside, people are gonna be trying to,
Well, that's up
Steal
to,
it and
right,
everything else.
well, and that's up to the person who's growing it
Yeah, I
to
understand that.
maintain that. But then you've got more concerns of the police having to actually go to a site because someone's complaining that someone's, trespassing or whatever. So that would be what some of those one-time fees would be used for, to offset some of those additional costs to the town.
I would think it would follow the same guidelines as for personal use, which is only inside. You can't grow it in your backyard, but, you could have 6 plants per person, or
No,
12 per household.
No, I think that it
would
would
have
make
to-
the most sense
That's
to
what I meant.
control it.
Yeah.
But I think that there is the opportunity to grow it outside. But I think that it makes the most sense for the purveyor, the production, to do it inside.
Inside, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
so they have control.
I would just be
You can really
afraid if
control
it's
it.
outside and there's kids,
You'd have to put
they're
up a-
gonna want,
you'd have
right,
to
you're
put up
gonna
a
have to
6-foot
fence that
fence
in,
around
you're
it.
gonna, have to- you almost put a building around it.
Right.
And then, the people that are growing it, not to say they'll do this, but, they catch a kid or something trying to steal their stuff, they're gonna get their ass beaten.
Right, yeah, so I think those are the kinds of things that we could address, and we could build in. We've already got the medical marijuana bylaw, and we have the provisions as to where that's allowed. So it's really adapting that in some respects. So I'd like you all to take a look at what was provided. I thank you, Wilma. Wilma did provide it all in your packages. I made copies this evening, but it's good, useful information.
How are those meetings when you went to them?
They were great. The Attorney General's office was there. They ran it. They ran the meeting. It was,
So they're not,
If you don't mind, I'll tag along with
Yeah.
you on some of them.
sure, yeah. That, well, Wilma sent sends a notice around for them, and that one, I know she had sent it to us, and I just went in. It was held at the Heck Building, the Hampshire Educational Collaborative Building on Holly Street. So, all right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Being adjourned.